What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Talkin TV Season 5 finale. So for this one, in order to kind of cap off and commemorate everything that I've done so far this year, Season 5, the 2023 season, there was a lot that happened this year. There was a lot that happened just in general for the podcast. Our biggest year, our biggest movie season yet for the podcast. In order to commemorate it, just finishing up with just like one or two movies didn't feel... It didn't feel right. It didn't feel like the right direction to go. It didn't feel like the right way to end this year, which, like I said, has been a big year. So what I decided to do is something completely different. I decided to do a mini podcast every single day for the last 5 days. So the version of this that you're about to hear is 5 different days worth of podcasting, all edited together into one big, long podcast extravaganza. 5 days, 5 movies, 1 movie each day. So the segments you guys are about to hear, I hit Godzilla -1 on Monday, Zone of Interest on Tuesday, Maestro on Wednesday, The Iron Claw on Thursday, and then wrapped it up with Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire on Friday. I had a variety of different guests, some new, some returning throughout this. It's like I said, I've never done anything like this before, and it's going to be pretty big. So if you guys want to stay tuned and listen to the whole thing, you're more than welcome to. If not, the time codes will be in the description below. Other than that, though, have fun, enjoy, and this is, as always, the Talkin TV podcast. This is a big one. I've been anticipating this one for a while. So this entire week, this is going to be a special one. I ended up getting some time off in between the end of my semester and when the actual holiday festivities start for me. So we are doing 5 straight days of podcasting. That's right. Every day of this week, Monday to Friday, you are getting a little bit of the Talkin TV podcast. Today, tomorrow, we're doing a movie a day, a podcast a day, and at the end of the week, it's all going to get edited together into one big, giant conglomerate. I am, once again, of course, Dom the Movie Nerd, and I am joined by first-time guests to the show, but not so much first-time guests in my life, Dexter Fletcher Lance Armstrong, which is a nickname that I literally just came up with like 5 minutes before we got on. Dex, you managed to come out of the woodwork. You saw Godzilla -1 with me today, and you begged to come on the podcast. And I'm like, you know what? Screw it. Let me actually do it. How you doing, man? Were you expecting this movie to be as good as it was? First and foremost.
First of all, begged is a strong word. I requested. Second of all, movie. I actually can't remember the last time I've seen like a foreign film. It was fantastic. I'm no like stranger to like what subtitles and stuff. Like I'll watch anime and like I've seen a foreign film before, but man, this film was moving. That's all I'll say.
Moving indeed, to say the least. Oh yeah, Dex, I just realized this is the first time you aren't used to the format. So, but wait, we actually have a comment. This is the first comment that we've had in like months from Robotom17. Is that Tai Lung? I'm assuming that is a reference that you will understand. If I had to guess, that is probably your friend right there.
Yeah, that's my buddy Tommy.
Oh man, that's funny. Well, do I even want to ask about the Tai Lung reference? Do I even want to know?
He's just the GOAT.
You know what? You would be correct. There's a reason why he is making his reappearance in the up-and-coming Kung Fu Panda 4, which hopefully that'll be better than 3. But so, Dex, so I think it's safe to say that it has never been a better time to be a Godzilla fan right now. That's with the amount of Godzilla content that is going on right now. You obviously have the very popular MonsterVerse that the 4 MonsterVerse movies that are produced by Legendary, Godzilla, Kong, Skull Island, Godzilla, King of the Monsters, and Godzilla vs. Kong that have come out over the last couple of years. And then Apple TV Plus is also doing this TV show that's kind of acting as like an intermediary between those movies. It's called Monarch Legacy of Monsters. It's basically, the way that I can describe it is that it's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but for the MonsterVerse. And so naturally, right? What's interesting is that you have obviously Godzilla, which is traditionally a Japanese property that has kind of sort of been like co-opted by America as being like this massive popularized force. But needless to say, the American take on it is much, much different than the original Japanese take on it. It was obviously Godzilla as an original creation was conceived as this response to them getting bombed at the end of Pearl Harbor, and the idea of, okay, what if the radiation, what would be the fallout effects from the radiation, say, after the bombing? And so they created this allegory of, this gigantic dinosaur-like monster that came and just destroyed, their homeland. And now the company that was founded that originally had the rights to it, Toho, has continued to do their own productions of Godzilla over the last couple of years. You had this movie that came out back in 2016. I want to say it was called Shin Godzilla that came out. That got some pretty decent response, but I feel like it didn't really gain the traction because that was when like the MonsterVerse was really starting to make its first appearance. But I think after a couple of years, it's safe to say that, just with the whole Marvelification of it and how those American movies have really gone from like something kind of interesting and new where Godzilla is almost acting as like this protector and rather this like voyeur into this bigger world of monsters as we dove deeper and, we explored the Hollow Earth and his connections to King Kong and all that. But they've gotten kind of a little bit ridiculous. You have the trailer that just came out for Godzilla and Kong, the New Empire, which is coming out in April. And then you got Godzilla with pink spikes. You got Kong wearing a fucking mech glove. You got like the Scar Giver or whatever, as like they're exploring Hollow Earth. And like they really are just getting like to be Marvel movies at this point where it's just like, okay, we're just going to cause unwanted amount of destruction and we're just not going to care. And so I feel like this was the perfect time for this movie, Godzilla Minus One, which is the next production from Toho post Shin Godzilla, which, again, you want to talk about just a movie that brings back the beauty of simplicity in this stuff, which is, again, giant monster invades the homeland. You kind of have like this massive mustering of all of Japan in order to try and repel it before it causes more unwanted damages. But the biggest thing that I notice about this movie is that this movie gives us what it feels like all the American movies have been missing, which is the biggest criticism, I would say, of the American movies, which is the human factor. You actually cared about the human characters. The humans, not the monsters, are at the front and center, where it centers around this main character, who I'm going to look up his name right now. I believe it is Shikishima was his name, I want to say. I probably
Yeah.
screwed that up. That sounds
No,
about
that
right.
was it. That was it.
Yeah, Shikishima. Oh, wow. I got it one go. Nice. Shikishima, who is a kamikaze pilot who bails out at the last minute. He lands on this island for repairs, and the chief repairman is like, oh, that's weird. You said that your plane was damaged, but there aren't any repairs. And it's very clear that he has PTSD from the war. He doesn't care about it anymore. He just wants to get out. He wants to go home. And then, of course, the island gets attacked by Godzilla. And then you have probably a pretty extensive period of time that happens in between that for the first time that you see Godzilla. And then, obviously, when when he comes back, much bigger and badder and ready to kick ass and take names. But I mean, my first question for you is like, I mean, obviously we talked a little bit before we saw the movie earlier today about like how many Godzilla movies you see, but like what was probably the biggest difference that you noticed between this movie and the other American Godzilla that you've seen?
I think it's probably the focus on the monsters. So, like, I know you were talking about it, but in like the last Godzilla movie that I saw was the one with Millie Bobby Brown in it. It was a big thing of it was like Godzilla, um, and like him as the monster versus all the other monsters, right? But in this one, especially like even during the first like 10 minutes when they're on Odo Island, it's about the main character and how he's abandoned his post, his duty, and then like, we see that he's actually accepted, which is kinda crazy because versus the rest of the movie, he's shunned and people are mad at him for abandoning his post as a kamikaze pilot. But within the first 5 minutes, that's already changed up, um, because, like, they've accepted him and they're actually willing to let him stay on the island as a mechanic. And then Godzilla comes and it's a completely it also surprised me that it was a completely different look. I guess because maybe I'm so used to the American films, but this one seemed really different. And obviously that gets explored within the next 20 minutes of the film. But I think the biggest difference already was just the focus on monsters in the American ones, but now it's a focus on the characters.
Yeah, you actually had like human characters and it was about like the human struggle. And it was almost like you could almost take like I feel like the first 20, 30 minutes of this movie and just make that about like a post World War II struggling to reacclimate to what society has now become, because he returns to Tokyo or Ginza, sorry, is the city that he went back to, and like it is just like reduced to rubble. And the people are just like trying to pick up the pieces of their lives and go on. To me, it was very, very reminiscent of some Italian neorealist films that I saw in film school, which are, which after World War II, right? Italy was one of a couple European countries that were just in ruins. And one of the goals of, the things that produce filmmakers like Fellini and Vittorio Storaro was basically trying to portray like just on the ground, like very common struggles of people who are just like trying to pick up their lives in like as they like their entire way of life has essentially been destroyed. And I thought that was really compelling. I thought it was an excellent way to draw you into the movie and really make you empathize with these characters in a way that I would just say the American movies have just not bothered to do and are really just not concerned with at all, really. And so that was already amazing in itself, and how they built up this like really cool cast of characters, like I said, Shikishima, and how he comes back. You have his neighbor, you have his what's it called, so you have this woman who shows up out of nowhere with this kid that she's just rescued, who he ends up taking in, and then you have his next door neighbor that he's friends with, and then you have like this little crew that he joins that are basically like taking out old mines from World War II, and like you really get a chance to like spend time and get to know these characters. And that's before you even see Godzilla again. And they do this really interesting thing also tying into like the political machinations that are kind of overhanging it as well. The post-World War II political ramifications, which is where you have the Bikini Atoll bombings, which results in like the mutation of Godzilla, because you see Godzilla at the beginning, he's a lot smaller and than the normal size Godzilla that we've seen. And so they're kind of a little bit mixing around with that as well, where they're kind of showing that like, oh no, Godzilla's kind of already been a thing. We're not really concerned with showing like the origin of it, but what's cool is like we have like this real world event that happens that then creates this new conflict right after they've just like gotten out of this previous conflict with World War II. And now you've got this whole new conflict, which is where they're like, oh God, this giant thing is coming to eat us all. And nothing that we can do seems to affect it, seems to kill it. They're firing off bombs. They sow the seeds very interestingly though, where when you have the sequence when Godzilla is chasing like their little ship, and then they have to let the mines go, and they manage to successfully detonate the mine inside of its mouth. And they're like, okay, that did some damage, and then it like regenerates instantly, and you're like, oh crap, we're screwed. And then you have like, the sequence of the movie, which is when Godzilla first makes contact in Ginza. And you just see, like, again, just how they build it perfect up. This director's name, I'm looking it up because I don't want to butcher it, is Takashi Yamazaki. You can tell that not only was he influenced heavily by the original Godzilla 1954, but he was also, there's a lot of Spielberg in here, like specifically the first instance where you see Godzilla attacking Odo, that like very, very much reminiscent of the T-Rex attack from Jurassic Park, the way that he's moving through the water, the way that they like amp up the dread before you even see him come out and attack the ship. It's very Jaws-esque. So I thought that in terms of like actually building up the horror and the scariness of Godzilla in a way that really hasn't been done in a long, long time, I thought was particularly effective as well. What were your thoughts on that?
On making him scarier?
Yeah.
I think especially during the first part, it was kind of a weird, like, dynamic with him and the main character. Oh man, Shikishima, because I don't know. I thought that I didn't think they were gonna start talking or anything, but Godzilla is terrifying, especially because when they turn on the spotlight and then we see him roar out of absolutely nowhere. Like it's not a jump scare, but it's just a fear factor. Like nobody expected him to be there. We know about Godzilla, but it's the first time that we're seeing him in this way versus when we see him in the American films. And just the lack of like knowing, like we don't know anything about it. And then especially when he's hiding in his plane, and then Godzilla comes, and then he lets him live, which I thought was weird. And I'm not sure, they never really explained it. Maybe it's just simply because he didn't attack. Because I guess if you look throughout the whole movie, the only reason he attacks them is because they started it. But at the same time, that's not also really fully true. So that did kind of confuse me, and it kind of took me out of the like fear aspect because maybe a classic chase they could have done that, but it was just weird to see that he didn't attack him, and then obviously he was going to start attacking the ignorant people who shot him.
Right. Well, I find it interesting, right? Because the idea of like the biggest theme I would say in this movie is the idea of like, self-preservation versus like sacrificing yourself for a greater cause. That was very clear from the jump, especially tying into the whole idea of the kamikaze. And there's a lot of conversations between the human characters about like, what is an honorable sacrifice versus what is just kind of dying pointlessly for a cause and, not leaving a legacy behind, And I thought
Mm.
that was particularly interesting because that's Shikishima's whole conflict throughout this entire thing is the fact that, he's, for the first half of the movie, he's regarded as a coward, you abandon your post, your entire whole thing is to die for your country. And then later on in the movie, you have some of the older men who are like, yeah, maybe if we had more of a self-preservationist attitude, maybe we wouldn't lose so many people in general to what they are attributing is sort of a pointless war. And as far as the connection between him and Godzilla, right? You're right. How they treat Godzilla in this movie is interesting because, like I said, he is much more of a monster. He is much more of a force as opposed to in the American movies where he's almost like, in a weird way, like a pet almost. I mean, he's not really, but he's like, the way that they set up him and Kong in those movies is it's like, oh, Kong, like, talks with people and he can like communicate with them. And Godzilla, he's like, oh, as long as you don't get in his way, he'll like protect you from the other bigger, scarier monsters who do want to eat you. And here, there's none of that to be found. There's none of that to be found. It's like Godzilla, he's just a force to be reckoned with. You don't know when he's coming. There's nothing you can do to control him. You can't reason with him. It's like the Terminator. He comes in, he wrecks shop, he leaves, he does what he wants, And sure, like the movements are probably a little slower and clunkier. He doesn't move like the one thing I will say that the American movies have is that the American movies are much more so what's it called? They much more so nail like the animalistic nature of them in terms of like getting the smoother movement. So this one, because the effects aren't like to the level that they are in America, like the movements are a little clunkier. Like when he moves, it's very much more so like dinosaur-esque rather than lizard-esque. But I think that what you get from that as a result is something that is, again, just way more terrifying. Like I was on the edge of my seat watching this in a way that I really have not been watching a Godzilla in a long time. And I mean, the atomic breath is such a staple of him, but I mean, holy shit, like when he God damn.
Oh my God. I turned and looked at you in the theater because
Bro,
I was like, Chad, is this real? Like that was crazy. Oh my God.
I looked at that and I was like, bro, see, because like you have like the atomic breath of the American movies, and that's fun. To me, it's like the equivalent of like a Marvel blue sky beam. He blasts it for a little bit, he burns some shit, but there's a fall. What he does, first of all, the build up to it is insane because rather than just like, it's always like the spikes start to glow progressively one at a time, and then he blows up. Nah, not only did the spikes glow, you saw them shits like shoot out one at a time, and the camera like stayed on. It's like, oh, we want you to see this. We want you to see this. Like, we want to make sure that you understand every bit of this buildup right here. Because when that breath came out, bro, it was like a fucking nuclear explosion every time. And like you felt it too. Like there's a sequence where the first time when he does the atomic breath, when he's stomping through Ginza, and there's a sequence involving the two main characters where literally like you have it, like he's not even aiming at them either, but he aims at like something else, blows up the building, and then just the fallout right from the like everyone like I remember was going nuts with Oppenheimer over the summer with the explosion, right? When that happened, and the fact of, oh man, that felt so real, because it's like, you had the delay between actually seeing the explosion versus when you felt the shockwave from it, because of the distance. But here, oh man, you felt that shockwave like instantly, like as soon as it hit. And oh, it was not pretty. Like, and it ended up, and you ended up like, oh God, I don't even have words to describe it. It was just, oh man, ass on the edge of your seat. And I'm like, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I watch movies for. And I definitely understand why everybody is going so nuts over this.
I wouldn't Speaking of the atomic breath, I wouldn't say I was disappointed the first time we saw it because the buildup with the spikes coming out of the spine was super cool. But like later in the film, when they're on the boat and we see it for you know what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
When they're on the boat and we get the slow motion of everybody on the team and they look at him, that was insane because it was
Yeah.
quiet, it was dead quiet in the theater. I thought somebody was gonna fart or something and try and be funny, but I was so happy that everybody was dead silent because it made the experience just so much crazier, especially when the sound actually, like, kicked in on us, just like in
Yes.
Oppenheimer. It was so cool. They
Yeah.
built up to it twice, and the second time was even greater than the first, which I didn't know was
Yes.
possible.
Yes, exactly. It's just like it's just to me, and I don't want to I don't want to collectively shit on American movies in general because I feel like I've been doing that all year. But it's like whenever
Probably.
everybody is trying to figure out what is it that's missing from these movies, what is it that is constantly making it so that every single movie just feels like it is trying to go for the meme. And then I look at this and it's like, well, no, you've had like these couple, like I feel like foreign films have really been making way more of an impact on American audiences like in the last couple of years post COVID. You had you had a Japanese film that was nominated for Best Picture a couple of years ago, Drive My Car. You also had that same year what's it called, a Norwegian film, The Worst Person in the World, that also got a couple of nominations. And it's like the reason why you keep seeing these movies start to come out over and over again is because it's kind of like what's happened throughout the entire history of cinema, which is where you have which where you have one sector of the world that inspires the other, and then it kind of like causes this ripple effect, right? Because Akira Kurosawa, right, one of the originators of Japanese cinema, has constantly cited like John Ford and like old American westerns as being the inspiration for all of his stuff, and then he goes and inspires George Lucas, obviously, and a bunch of other American filmmakers, and so I feel like it's kind of like you're seeing the cycle start to come back around of you have this entire generation of foreign filmmakers that have grown up watching the last like 20 years of American cinema, and now that American cinema, I would argue, is at an all-time low. You're seeing just all of these different like crazy new different types of films that are not exactly groundbreaking because they're not doing things that we haven't seen before, but what they're doing is they're doing what all good filmmakers do, which is they are taking and they're putting their own little spins on them in order to make them like really interesting. Because like you said, we've seen the atomic breath before, we've seen buildups like that before, but it's how it's executed and the fact that he really goes out of his way to make you feel every single minute and every single piece of impact that it has on the setting, on the characters, and he really takes his time to show that like when he stomps on something, he's not like running around or like fucking going back on his tail to levitate forward and kick some shit like they used to do. No, he is like stomping on shit and he is destroying shit and you feel it every single minute. I mean, come on. I mean, how many movies of like nonstop chaotic destruction, city destroying nonsense have we watched over the last 2 years? And this is finally the first time where it feels like, wow, we like actually feel for. We feel for these characters. We feel for everything that's happening in this movie.
Oh, so, are we allowed to talk about spoilers, or
Yeah,
we're
I
not
think I
going
kind
off
of
the
already,
hook?
I think I kind of already ripped the band-aid off there for spoilers.
All right. Oh my God. When she died, oh my God. Dude, I started crying. That was insane. That was crazy. I didn't expect. I was kind of annoyed because I feel like they both could have hid. So
Right.
to paint a quick picture, nuclear blast, some like big ass wind is
Yeah.
coming, and
The
they have to
character, by
hide
the way,
behind a
is the name of
building.
Noriko. Noriko
Oh,
is the
Noriko,
character's
I
name.
have them all pulled up. My bad. I didn't want to like.
Don't
My
worry,
bad.
that's what I'm here
So
for.
so Noriko pushes like the main
Tsukishima,
sorry, the
yeah.
main protagonist. Sh- thanks Dom.
You're
So
welcome.
Noriko pushes Shikishimi behind the building, but I feel like she could have just they both could have hid. But I guess it created a cool like kind of like plot device for his like reasoning for doing what he does later in the film. That just kind of bothered me, but that scene was still really cool, especially with the rain that came after that.
Yeah. Yeah.
He did a great job acting in that.
Yeah.
His screams,
Yeah.
those hit deep.
Yeah, they really did. I looked over at you at one point and like I saw tears coming down your face. I'm like, dude, are you crying? I'm like, what? I'm like,
Yeah,
but
that
that's
was
how
at the end.
but that's
That
how
was
emotional.
because at the now at the end, man, I that was I think like the I had one tear that went down my face because at the end when I mean, are we like spoiling the movie or like
Well, I mean, I don't know if that was a bit that you were doing, but if it was really good.
a bit? No, it
Yeah.
was moving.
Yeah.
What?
No, 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 no,
I
no.
wasn't doing
No.
any
I
bit.
meant when she died.
I'm talking about at the very end.
Right, right. I know. That's what
Like
I'm saying.
oh yeah, that was crazy.
We're just like talking around
Um,
this in circles, and everyone who hasn't seen this is gonna be like, dude, what the fuck are you talking about?
well, maybe go fucking see the movie. Are we allowed to
Yeah,
swear too?
exactly. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Go fucking
I
see the movie.
I keep forgetting. No, I keep forgetting that like this is your first time on the podcast, so there's a whole
Yeah,
bunch of
my
different
bad.
things. Yeah. Oh yeah. All bets are off when it comes to this. I don't give a shit. But yeah, no, it's yeah. If there's one thing that I can safely say, it's like Godzilla -1. I mean, dude, this movie had like such a massive impact that like they put it. Like, I think this movie was supposed to leave theaters like this week, and they put like an extra like 2 weeks on it, so that because that's how
Really?
many people were going to see. Yeah, it's already become like it's like between this and Boy and the Heron is like
What does
one
it
of the highest
gross?
grossers. So if this was made on like a $15 million budget, roughly, and it's already grossed like 65 million worldwide, which is tremendous. Not to
Are you
mention the fact,
serious?
yeah, not to mention the fact that again, $15 million budget, $15 million budget. In comparison, The Flash, which came out over the summer, right, massive bomb, $300 million budget, and see what that movie looked like.
Yeah, no, it's already gotten like worldwide like 64 million
Yeah,
or something crazy.
it's doing really well. It's doing really really well, and I'm
It deserves
really
it.
really
I,
beyond happy that it's doing this.
I had where did the -1 come from? Godzilla
That's
-1?
That's
Do
a
you know
good
anything about that?
question. I actually am not sure about that. If I'm looking under the development right now, as far as the title goes, yeah, I'm not seeing it. Yeah, I don't know. But I am seeing right here. Yep. Yamazaki stated, yep, inspired by original 1954 Godzilla, Spielberg's Jaws, and Hayao Miyazaki, and his other influences, Close Encounters of the Third Kind and Jurassic Park. So yeah, that was pretty apparent right there. But yeah, I don't know where the -1 comes from, but who knows? Who cares? It worked. It was effective. What's it called? Like I said, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I already put this in my top 10 of the year. Once I put it in Letterboxd.
What did you boot? What did you boot out?
Let me check right now. I booted out American Fiction, which I had in yesterday. So right now the movies that are vying for that number 10 spot besides Godzilla -1, I've got American Fiction, Beau is Afraid, and Boy and the Heron. I'm still not sure if Across the Spider-Verse will stay in there, as well as Dumb Money. Like I said, it's going to be tough. It's going to be really, really tough for me when I'm doing this top 10 at in January, because geez, I already know that like at least like 2 other movies that I see between this week and next week are going to be vying for that top spot. So
Where'd you put Barbie again in that list?
oh God, you're really gonna make me do this. You're really gonna make me do this now.
Just say it. I don't want to make this the topic. It's Godzilla, but in
Yeah,
your like
Barbie
64
right
list, there's
now, as
Barbie.
of right now, is ranked in the top 10 worst of the year. But it's no secret
Okay.
because
All right. That's good. Cool.
everybody who saw my review that I did over the summer of the Barbenheimer knows exactly my feelings on that movie. So that's not exactly a surprise.
No, it's cool. We're talking about Godzilla. I just want to know.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
everybody else who's watching can know.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, definitely not put me on blast there at all. But yeah, so like I said, people, these are going to be some shorter episodes for sure. Like I said, we're not doing the full hour each week. We're going to do about between 20 and 30 minutes each day. So like I said, we'll be back tomorrow. I'll be back with Gal Balaban tomorrow talking about the zone of interest. But for right now, so Dex, so the way we usually end these things, we usually give our final thoughts and our star ratings out of 5. So what would your final thoughts and star rating be for Godzilla -1?
Final thoughts and the way I described the movie was that a it was a moving film about a guy and his whole redemption arc, essentially just about his life. Like the whole movie was a redemption arc, but it obviously if it's spanning throughout the whole movie, he keeps getting set back. So it was a redemption arc and a love story with a Godzilla title.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And then out of 5, what would you give it?
Fuck it. 4 point. Is this David Portnoy? Am I giving like a 4.6, 4.8?
You,
Like,
dude,
what
give
are
it, give it what you want. Give it what you want.
I'd say it's a solid 4.8.
4.8, dude.
4.8.
Dude, you're gonna think I'm crazy. I gave this 5. I gave it 5 out of 5. I did not have a single problem.
Oh,
with
I
this
didn't know if we
movie.
were allowed to do that.
Oh no, you
I'll
can give
give
it,
it a
dude. It's
5.
your rating. Fuck it. Do what you want.
Oh, fuck it. I'll give it a fucking 5. That was
Yeah,
an
dude,
insane
5
movie.
out of 5.
I
That
loved
was
it. If you want to go see it again tomorrow,
banger
I'll
movie,
go
dude.
see it again.
I might go. Dude, I might have to watch this again. That movie was so good. That movie was so fucking good. Seriously. So yeah, Godzilla -1, 5 out of 5. Like I said, for those who are watching us on YouTube, we'll be back tomorrow with Zone of Interest. For those of us who are listening to the podcast, to the audio version, stay tuned for Zone of Interest, which is next. In the meantime, Dexter, thank you for coming on, dude. Do you have any social media
Good seeing you,
profiles
buddy.
or places you want to plug?
Yeah, follow my Steam account, Hydrobuster. Yeah.
Follow my
And
Steam
my league.
account and your league, of
My
course.
League of Legends, Optimus Prime 745.
All right, people. Day 2, movie number 2 of the Talkin' TV season 5 finale. And I'm joined once again by Gal Balaban to talk about one of the most interesting movies that I've seen so far of the year. This is a movie that I was looking forward to since it was announced. I'm a big fan of Jonathan Glazer, the director of this. His work that he did with Under the Skin was absolutely unparalleled. And Gal, all I'm going to say is, I was definitely not expecting a vibe movie about Nazis, to say the least, going in. Like, I knew that this movie was going to be about Nazis, but in terms of just like, oh, this is just a day in the life sort of thing, was not expecting that, to say the least. So, you have anything to say before we jump right into this?
Let's jump right in. This is interesting because I've seen this movie a couple months ago and you just got out of it. So
Yes.
I want to know a bit about your experience watching this movie. Let's get into everything.
Absolutely. And for day 2, like I said, we are finally back in the world of A24. For everybody who's seen Dream Scenario, obviously good for you. I unfortunately have not watched an A24 movie since I saw Priscilla back at New York Film Festival in October. And I have to say that just
new.
the A24 brand in general has, let's say, not been the same since COVID. There just hasn't been the same. We've got like a few good ones, that are reminiscent of old, Ty West's X and Pearl, Everything Ever All at Once, The Whale. I had a lot of fun with Bodies when that came out last year. Red Rocket in 2021. But I feel like overall, the brand of A24, which was like kind of like the pioneer of, as far as like what was leading the charge for independent cinema for the last couple of years leading up to the pandemic. Obviously, again, they made waves with movies like Room, Moonlight, Lady Bird, Hereditary, Uncut Gems was like their big push forward, and obviously smaller movies like The Lighthouse, The
I
Witch.
just realized you
The
said
Witch.
they made waves with those movies,
Right,
not
and I
they
didn't
made the
realize that
movie
too.
Waves,
But
which
they
they
also
did
did
make the
make the
movie
movie Waves.
Waves.
They did make the movie Waves, indeed. And so going into this movie, right, you've got Jonathan Glazer, who famously was already kind of like a not very a prominent director to begin with, but an interesting one. He made his breakout with Sexy
I
Beast
mean,
in 2001.
yeah, he's made Oscar-nominated movies still.
Yeah, but probably where I noticed him was his effort that he released in 2014 for A24, one of the earlier efforts from them, Under the Skin, starring Scarlett Johansson, which is still one of the most fascinating and just interesting movies that I've seen, because that movie, it's basically making like Species, but like if it took itself seriously and wasn't a joke, which Species, the movie, pretty much is a joke, let's be honest here. And so obviously, it's been almost 10 years since that movie now. That movie came out in 2014. And when I saw this, it was kind of one of those instances where Under the Skin had such an impact on me that I'm like, okay, I don't care what this guy's next movie is. I can't wait to see it. Until I saw that, I'm like, oh, great. Another movie about Nazis, because people already didn't react negatively enough when Taika Waititi dared to portray Nazis in a humorous light in Jojo Rabbit. We all remember how well majority of people took that. So, needless to say, this didn't exactly. I mean, I'm still looking forward to it, but
movies, yeah.
definitely a completely different movie to say. But you understand where I'm coming from, at the very least. And so I watched it finally. It's taken me a little bit of time to watch it, but I finally got a chance to watch it. I literally just got out of it about an hour ago. It took me about a half an hour,
which is so interesting. Like I think it's perfect that we're talking about this like right after you got out.
Yeah, literally right after.
I still remember my sort of, yeah.
It's one of those instances where I am definitely still processing it. I am definitely still processing my thoughts, my emotions, just everything that goes on, because it is definitely, I can say like immediately right off the bat that while it is definitely not one of my favorite movies of the year, it is certainly one of the most fascinating movies that I've seen this year. And certainly I don't think I've ever seen a movie like it where, oh man, yeah. I mean, just starting off from like the cinematography alone, like the fact that Glazer purposefully chooses to place like everything at like beyond arm's length. Like he shoots everything with very, very wide angles. He keeps everything in wide shots. I don't think there's a single close-up in this entire movie. So everything is very purposely held at arm's length.
That's right? A really good point, yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't want you to like really connect to these characters. He is very much sort of presenting it, I would say,
almost
sort of like,
yeah, almost like a time capsule.
Yeah.
Or like a fly on the wall time capsule effect for sure.
Exactly. It reminds me a lot of what Sean Baker did with the Florida Project, where a lot of that movie, again, is very much, again, keeping the characters at arm's length, wanting the audience to be a fly on the wall, not really wanting them to, like, be inside these characters' heads. There's a few brief moments where we get some, like, okay, this is what's, like, actually going on in their lives, So, Gull, break it down exactly. So you got to see this movie a couple of months ago at Toronto International Film Festival. What exactly is the Zone of Interest about? Like, break it down for me. Like, what's it about? What are your thoughts on it in general? Well, I still like just process mine.
Okay, yeah. So I saw this at the TIFF premiere, not world premiere, because it first premiered at Cannes, where Jonathan Glazer actually won Best Director. And so I had heard about it from Cannes, and I heard that it was really something. So it was one of my most anticipated going in, because I knew that it was going to be like an experience. Like I knew it was going to be like a relentless sort of movie. And it's basically about, like you said, it's almost a day in the life movie from the perspective of Nazi commander Rudolf Haas, who he and his family basically lived across the wall from Auschwitz when he was stationed there as commander. It's a very different movie from anything that I've ever seen. I mean, you made the comparison to the Florida Project from the cinematography approach, and you could say, oh, you might want to watch this if you've watched Schindler's List or Pianist because it's about Nazis. But besides those remarks, I can't really compare this to any movie I've seen, because Jonathan Glazer, he kind of changes or throws away like the classic approaches to narrative film. Because it doesn't really have a 3-act structure. Like you said, like it's kind of the wide shot at arm's length. There's no real like title cards or real like effort to fill you in on history. But at the same time, this could only have worked as a narrative film. and the experience that it makes. I personally think, the term like masterpiece from a filmmaking perspective is thrown around a lot. I've heard it a lot for this movie, and I wouldn't really disagree because it's just so like it's so singular in what he's trying to tell. And um I've also visited those sites, and um, so like it even hits harder, especially. But something about the approach that he gives, I think the cinematography is like honestly some of the best I've ever seen because it's so key. Like you can't watch this movie without volume. The sound editing is so key. The way I listen to interviews, honestly, to prep for this, and he mentioned that the sound design was sort of there's movie one, which is the main movie, and then movie two, which is they sort of made this whole exchange of, dialogue or sound on what's going on in Auschwitz. But then that's like what you barely hear. They're not paying attention to that. The two movies have to like stay separate. Or I read that like to evoke like this day in the life feeling of like they would leave the camera on for 10 minutes sometimes to just like have them going about their lives, which is a really interesting approach.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that. It's one of the things that I've loved just about like, more traditional narrative films where some of my favorite movies, for instance, There Will Be Blood or another Paul Thomas Anderson movie to compare, Phantom Thread, where you see like the first 10, 15 minutes, there's like no sound or dialogue. It's just like people going about their day and just going about their daily
Really
lives.
good comparison.
And what's even more
Damn, like the
fascinating
Phantom
too,
Thread, that's really good.
exactly, like just him like fastidiously like going about
Like with
his
her
routine in
trying
the
on
morning.
that's a really good
Yes,
comparison.
exactly.
Damn.
Not to mention the
Okay.
fact
You're
that
always great with these comparisons.
what can I say? I'm the encyclopedia when it
Like,
comes to this thing.
like when
But
he
like
talked
what's
about
even
like Poor Things with Kubrick, I listened to that. That was really
yeah,
good.
well, and what's even crazier is like if you're just like going into this without any knowledge of what it is, you might go like the first 10, 15, 20 minutes of the movie before you even realize that like, oh, what, these characters are Nazis or anything, because the opening image and the opening routine of like them just going about their lives, like living in this in this townhouse that's like literally like right on the like the wall at the edge of their house, like right overlooking it, you can see Auschwitz, and like the sound design is so good because like as the movie goes on and the screams of the what's it called of the Jews that are in the camp are like just becoming more and more prominent. They're kept very, very low in the beginning, and then they become more and more prominent. But again, like because what you're watching is so peaceful and it's just so day in the life, like you don't even realize that you're watching Nazis. And then like the movie almost works in tandem with you, where as you become more aware of what it is that you're watching, just the horror and just the true like disgusting nature of it ramps up. And like that was always the horror of the Nazis, right? It was the fact that they were human beings, just like everybody else. Obviously, we like to picture them as like these monsters of what's it called, these monsters, these horrific villains, these evil people. But in reality, they were just people going about their day, doing their jobs. And the main character, right, Rudolf Haas, is introduced as being this, this very, political machination. He wants to work his way up the ladder, all that, in order to maintain this beautiful life that they built for themselves, whatnot. And just like the scare, this is one of the first, like you said, right? This is coming off a long line of Holocaust movies. Your Schindler's List, your Pianist, Jojo Rabbit takes a very, very different take on it, but Jojo Rabbit, I feel it could be figured into that as well. There's numerous, Boy in the Striped Pajamas.
Sure, yeah.
I remember actually reading
Life
that
is beautiful.
novel. Yeah, Vita Bella, exactly. I remember, so I watched Boy in the Striped Pajamas and Life is Beautiful while I was in middle school and high school, respectively. So that was made, the horrors of that sect of history were made aware to me very, very, very early on, and also ties in with a little bit of my heritage as well. But but what's so fascinating, right, is seeing like what a different perspective this takes, and how like you see. I think this is one of the only instances where I've seen like a Nazi become like aware of it throughout the end. Like by the end, like this movie is not. It's so difficult to describe because this movie is not like justifying any of their actions, but the fact that it's like showing you and placing it in such real time, in such a, I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it. It's such an anachronistic way where by nature
Visceral,
of
maybe.
this, right,
Yeah.
visceral, that's an even better way to describe it, where by nature of the fact that this movie is so non-judgmental in its look at this family, because at the end of the day, you're like, yeah, these are kids, they don't know any better. Like they're just going about their lives. This is just their life. They have no understanding of it. But again, contrasted with some of these beautiful renditions where you have like these vistas where it'll just all of a sudden transition to like all black except for the characters who are like shadowed in white in order to like show like more of the stark contrast versus all the color scenes are shot
Oh my
with
god, yeah,
such
you could
like
have,
this,
that's insane.
yeah, with such like this voyeuristic, like heaven-like look almost, right? The opening shot is like so peaceful as they're just relaxing in this vista. And like I said, because it is kept at such arm's length, because there are no close-ups, because you're seeing everything from afar, right? You feel like you're almost like an intruder, but you can't look away almost. It's so fascinating, all of those different things and
Yeah,
all those different emotions which Glazer is evoking from you.
yeah, I remember. I don't know what it was like for you. Were there a lot of people in your screening when you went? Like it's
There
an afternoon
were.
screening. I don't know if you.
So it's so interesting. I saw it at the Angelica Film Center in downtown New York, and I saw it at 11:30 in the morning. And there were like more people than I expected there, but the theater was not packed by any stretch of the imagination. I purposefully, very purposely, sat in the back, away from everybody else, in the last row, just so I could like kind of have that experience for myself. And like sitting that far back from the screen was even more, I think, created even more of like a visceral experience for me, because there were points where I'm just like sitting there and I'm just like, oh my god, especially when they're contrasting the back and forth with like the little girl who's getting all the apples in black and white with Rudolph reading the story of Hansel and Gretel to his kids. I'm just like, oh my god, like
no, it's fucked.
Yeah,
I feel like I saw this. Well, my theater was full because a TIFF screening, obviously, but I sat really like up close in the theater, and I feel like you could feel it in the room. Like you could hear a pin drop because everyone was sort of glued. Like you were, the person who I talked to who was sitting next to me said like you kind of felt like you were sucked like into this time capsule, like you were lifted out of your seat. Because the beginning, there's this like really long like black screen music overture. I feel like that's sort of like this like gateway into like here, leave your reality, enter this time period in like a really dark way. And then so it sort of felt like the experience of watching it was like consuming you in this really twisted way. And what you said about non-judgmental, I feel like I understand where you're coming from. In any other context, like without knowing what the movie we're talking about, maybe that's not the right word, but because we're talking about the movie, and I know what you mean. Like I totally understand why you chose that word. I feel like if anything,
the context of it,
it's more sort of like, I feel like if anything, like in terms of non-judgment, again, I don't love that word, but it's like sort of what Jonathan Glazer is going for, like you said, is finding, as much as I hate to say it, like the commonalities, because they're still human beings.
It's finding the humanity.
Who made evil choices,
right? It's finding the humanity.
It's not like
it's finding the humanity.
It's like Jojo Rabbit, where they
right.
So no, I don't want to leave that sentence out because it's not like Jojo Rabbit. What I meant to say is it's not like Jojo Rabbit, where they make them out to be like these twisted, these insane clowns who say Heil Hitler all the time. This is like they're people who managed to lead these lives in this system that led them to like ignore these atrocities based on bigotry and nationalism. And so I guess like they make it look innocent in that way because, you know, for the kids it was, for a lot of people, because they were so, you know, they were so brainwashed into bigotry and ignorance. Like they wanted to know nothing. Like even there were so many small lines that kind of haunt you. Like you said, like they built this beautiful life for themselves. This scene where Sandra Huller is like, we built such a good life here, which is such a crazy thing to say there. Or when someone mentions to the commander that like his wife sent her wife sent the Führer Hitler flowers or something. So it's like even love is being poured into this system of evil that was existing all across a continent, which is just, I guess in that way, really paints like this. I think it does an incredible job in painting a time period in such a broad way, not without even showing us that much, but it still makes you understand exactly what was going on that side of humanity in this exact period of time, because of like, I don't really know how to finish that sentence, but
in order to reflect on your points that you just brought up, what I find is that most films are about trying to find the humanity in order to create a sense of empathy, right? Because that's ultimately how you connect with films. It's how you're able to connect with characters in films, and it's how you are ultimately able to see an experience that might be totally antithetical. In fact, most of the time films are antithetical to most people's existence, but you're still able to find some commonality there, right? What this movie is trying to do, and what I feel like this has in common with Glazer's other work, because I find it interesting that you mentioned that this isn't like a lot of his other movies, is Glazer is very purposefully exposing the humanity to evoke a sense of dread, in the sense of, it is by finding that sense of common humanity in people who have otherwise been vilified by history, and rightfully so, that creates this overwhelming sense of just horror when you realize that, what people are capable of, and they don't have to do it from a sense of maliciousness. In fact, most of the time they're not doing it from a sense of maliciousness, or if they are, it's so well covered up that not covered up.
I think it's the second option for you.
Yeah, it's so well. It's just been like they've just been like
it's almost delusion
to it. Exactly, that's exactly what it is. It's delusion. But even
like you
delusion,
said, they're working hard to create this great life for them.
Right.
Like I said, great life.
And when I say great life, I mean it's the sense of like what I truly mean by that is blissful ignorance is what it is. It's blissful ignorance, but not even, because because the wife character portrayed again in Sandra Hüller in her second of two brilliant performances this year after Anatomy of a Fall, she absolutely has some knowledge of it. She's telling him to freaking suck up to the Fuhrer, to Hitler himself during it. So she clearly has some knowledge of what her husband does and just the atrocities that are committed every single day. I mean, they hear the freaking screams of the people who are dying every day at the concentration camp right next door to them. So, oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of the point that we were both making, is like, because they were conditioned to, the horrific anti-Semitism that we saw that led to one of the worst atrocities ever in humanity, they kind of just went about their lives. They didn't care. Like, to them, it wasn't people the way we see other people over there, which is, especially like for me, comes from a bit of a personal place also, that this movie hit so hard, because, I am Jewish, and a lot of my great grandparents, unfortunately, fell victim to the horrors of the Nazis, and my great grandparents fled to Israel when they were hearing about the rise of Nazism. So I think in that way it even hits further when they show you, for almost the entire movie, you never see on that side of the wall. But if you don't want to know what you see at the end of the movie, warning, at the very end you sort of see shots of modern day Auschwitz, which is I don't love calling it a museum, but a tourist site, a museum where you can.
It's kept. I would say in order to make sure that the atrocities are never forgotten.
Yeah, exactly. And having been there, sort of the placement of that scene with like all the people's crutches and shoes and suitcases kept there as a memorial, that hit incredibly hard for me. Yeah. I think like that ending just stuck with me for the rest of the evening. And just adds a whole nother layer of like because that was last November where I went to Poland. And so honestly, like watching this movie almost a year later, I think like capped off something in my experience of connecting more with that period of history.
Yeah.
So that's the greatest compliment for this movie.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Yeah, that ending shot is just like when I came out of the movie, the only word that I could think of specifically after that ending, and the shot is very purposefully inserted, not as the closing shot of the movie, but rather an insert shot from the main character's perspective as he's leaving this party that's just been renamed in honor of him, as he's about to undergo this absolutely horrific what's called strategy of relocation. Of relocation. And then you see him like staring down the hallway. Yeah. And then you have the insert shot of the modern day, and then it cuts back to him before it cuts to black.
He just keeps walking.
Yeah, I'm just sitting there like it was a combination of I both couldn't leave my seat, but also I couldn't wait to get out of there, because I was like, oh man, just like the fact that like this is just emphasized, like I said, from just such a, because again, so many of these movies, like, like obviously, just look at Schindler's List. Ray Fiennes is rightfully portrayed as an absolute monster in that movie. And like Nobody, again, you never see anybody actually carry it out. You hear it, right? It's constantly as part of like the ambiance of the movie, but you never actually see anything. And that in a way makes it almost scarier. And also, I don't want to go too far, but there are a couple scenes when I see, the gardeners when they're like working and I see them pour in what I can only assume to be human remains as compost and fertilizer on there. And I'm just like,
Yeah. Oh my
yeah.
God.
I'm just like,
there are some incredible uses of symbolism, both in the dialogue
Yeah.
and like the stories that they tell, or the music that playing that's like implied to be like music written by Jewish artists, or even like you said, like items, like even the slide into the swimming pool looks
yes.
like something horrible that you would see
Mhm.
in a Auschwitz crematorium or something like you said. I think it's like it's weird that I don't say this from a place of a movie that I want to rewatch because I enjoyed it. I do want to rewatch it just to pick up on more of those things
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
this film was such a fascinating experience. Like I said, there were times where I winced at that kind of stuff, but it makes you like want to keep watching just because it's so brilliantly
Right.
put together. Um,
Yes.
by the way, how do you feel? This movie, in terms of Oscar chances, we saw it get nominated for the Golden
Yeah.
Globe for drama. How do you feel about this movie's Oscar chances in general?
Very interesting because again, like so many other Glazer movies, this is not like a typical Oscar baity movie. Now, even though
Mhm.
while it is about a
For sure.
subject matter that the Oscars love, they love Holocaust movies. But because of
Yes.
how
Yeah.
it's shot and because it's not shot in like a typical Oscar baity way, I think that outside of Best Picture and possibly adapted screenplay, I think that Sandra Hüller, they're going to put more of a push behind her because this is A24, but Anatomy of a
Right.
Fall is Neon. I have to assume that they're probably going to put more of a push for her behind her for Best Actress as opposed to Best Supporting.
For
And I
sure.
think
For sure.
I think this movie will definitely be more in the technical chances because again, the cinematography, the editing, the sound design is just impeccable. And also, too, probably the best use of a non-score that I've seen since No Country for Old Men. I know there's like brief bits of like musical score in the beginning and the very end with those cuts to black, but other than that, there's
I
no
kind of
score
wish there
in
was
this
more
movie.
of it. If there's any complaint I have with this movie, I would have loved more of that score because the
I'm
score
gonna
is
disagree only because
amazing.
I'm going to disagree only because I think that it was so purposefully well done in terms of, again, just making you sit
Mhm.
with each scene. And, like, I feel like for me, at least, any sort of a musical, like a score other than the ambiance, the backdrop would have been distracting for me.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it's still left an impression so much. That's why, if anything, I would have loved to hear more of it, just because it makes an
True.
impression as the bookends of the film. But that score was also nominated for, I think, Golden Globe for sure, maybe also Critics' Choice. Also, when I saw the movie, I felt similar as you. Like, this is, look, honestly, if you came out of this movie saying that wasn't what I expected, I was kind of bored by the pacing, even though I got the message, I wouldn't blame you just because it's so different in structure and pace from any movie that I've watched. But also, I just feel like, first of all, the awards attention it already got, and also the fact
Right.
it's been campaigning since Can, and I feel like it does have something strong to it, or it could be like 10, 11, 12 now in my predictions for picture.
Right.
But
The other
I
thing, too,
could
to
see it
consider
getting
as
nominated for
well.
original score.
Yeah, sorry, not to cut you off, but there was
I,
one other thing to consider as well, which is the foreign language of it all. Which is again, this is a movie that is
yeah, that's what I was gonna
entirely
say. Is
right. It's
there?
entirely in German, and we know that the last couple of years, right, the Oscars have been really trying to go out of their way to make sure that they get a foreign language film in there. You have Triangle of Sadness last year, Drive My Car the year before that.
That's in
So I
English.
would say that like this movie, in terms of its
I
best
think you mean
chances, right?
All
I
Quiet
feel
on
like
the Western Front last year.
well, sorry, you're right. All Quiet on the Western
Triangle
Front.
of Sadness was in English.
Well, Triangle of Sadness was in English, but it was a foreign language co-production. But you're right. All Quiet on the Western Front is the one that I'm thinking of.
But yeah,
So
what I mean
my
is like, so first of all, Anatomy of a Fall, France didn't submit it. That doesn't mean it doesn't have a great chance to get into picture. I think it does. But
right.
the Zone of Interest is being submitted by the UK as their submission. So I honestly think it has a strong chance to maybe even win that. And
Yeah.
cinematography, I would also bet
Yeah.
strongly. Potentially directing, I'd be down for
Yeah.
that. But
I'm not
I feel
bidding
like it's
against it
one
for
of
Best
those that could be a
Picture.
dark horse to get a couple of strong ones. I don't know if picture, but I feel like cinematography would be a a
Yes,
really safe
cinematography
bet for that.
100%. Especially because, like, I mean, let's face it, Oppenheimer is going to sweep when it comes to the technicals, but I would say this is like a very, very
Yeah.
probably the strongest rival to Oppenheimer when it comes to that. And like I said, as far as everything else, like I said, sound
Mhm.
design, production design, all impeccable. But yeah, as far as this being like
Ooh,
potentially the
sound design.
10th,
Yeah, yeah, sound design.
yeah. As far as being like the 10th best picture choice, I can absolutely see that happening. Because like I said, there's still a couple
Yeah,
more
that or
movies.
like Color Purple. I don't know.
Yeah, Color
This
Purple,
Triangle
I'm
of
not
Sadness, like you said, it was also an international one
right.
that came out as Best Picture nominee when many weren't expecting it. I could see this
Right.
having a similar path.
Right, exactly. So yeah, so it'll be very interesting to keep track of this movie's Oscar choices or Oscar chances as we get closer to awards time. Like I said, I have
Very
a couple
interesting,
more
yeah.
Oscar movies that I am that I'm watching. Like I'm watching Maestro tomorrow, and I'm also rewatching Ferrari. And
Mhm.
Ferrari has been like an interesting one, keeping track of it since it really had its big premiere. So I'll be interested to see where those go going forward. Like I said, it's going to be a little bit of a shorter episode. Like I said, shorter episodes each day going forward until the end of the week when we cap it with Rebel
By
Moon.
the way,
So we're doing yes,
oh, to cap it, I've
yes.
actually only seen one other Jonathan Glazer movie, which is um, Under the Skin. So, what else should I go to in his filmography? Because I
So
think you
it's
said you
funny that you
saw
mentioned
Sexy
that
Beast, right?
because Jonathan Glazer has actually not directed that many movies. If I'm not mistaken, I believe this is only his fourth feature film. He's directed a lot of
I'm pretty
music
sure you're
videos,
right.
a lot of commercials, and a decent amount of short films. But yeah, other than Sexy Beast in 2001, which got a supporting actor nomination for Ben Kingsley, Under the Skin with Scarlett, and this movie Zone of Interest, he has only directed one other movie, which is 2004's Birth, which is a French film starring Nicole Kidman and
No,
Lauren
it's Nicole.
Bacall.
Yeah, no, Nicole
Yep.
Kidman,
Yep. So yeah. So
which
Sexy
always
Beast.
looked interesting to me, but
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen them. I haven't yet.
I have not. I have not seen that. I have also not seen Sexy Beast either. I've only
Okay,
seen Under the Skin, but I've heard great things about Sexy Beast.
perfect. Got it.
So yes, you're in the same camp as me. So like I said, be interested to see this movie's Oscar choices. Like I said, tune in. So not only will this be the only episode that we put up today, later on tonight, Dustin the Duster Mason and I will be doing our Bradley Cooper Hall of Fame in honor of Maestro, which gets released officially on Netflix tomorrow. So that'll be a lot of fun to do. So stay tuned for that later on. We've also got, like I said, we got Maestro and Ferrari, which we are doing tomorrow night. Then Thursday, we've got the Iron Claw, and we're wrapping it on Friday with Rebel Moon. So like I said, people, we are sticking tuned to it. One day, one movie, one podcast each day for this week. Gall, before we get out of here, your final thoughts and star rating for the Zone of Interest.
Right now, it's sitting at 4.5 stars. We'll see what a rewatch does, but I don't see it leaving my top 10 of the year anytime.
Yeah, definitely gonna need a rewatch for me before I consider putting this in the top 10. But yeah, just as far as like definitely one of the movies that I'm going to be thinking about for a very, very long time. I'm right there with you. 4.5 out of 5. One of the again, just I can only think of one word coming out of this, which was just absolutely haunting. Just completely haunting. So
Yes,
yeah,
this
could
is
not think of it.
haunting the movie, and
Yes,
I use that word a
absolutely.
lot.
Yeah, I mean it fits. It's rightfully so. It's fitting. So, Gal, thank you so much for coming on again. What's it called? Like I said, part 2 of the Talkin TV season 5 finale. Where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
Film Toppings on Instagram, YouTube, and Feature Fanatics Pod, which is me and my friend's podcast. So yeah, all of that stuff you can find on Instagram, YouTube, and so on.
Movie number 3, part 3 of the Talkin TV season 5 finale. I'm joined once again by my good friend Nathaniel Ahart. Nathaniel, I don't think I've had you on a podcast since the 200th episode, dude. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I mean, I'm enjoying movies, could be better, but hey, this is the best time of year for movies, and it has proven to be the best time for movies in years, I would say, since 2019. So I'm very excited to get on here and talk about a couple of these movies today. Thanks for having me once again.
Of course, man. You know that you're one of my go-tos for this stuff. I only wish that I could have you on more. And Nathaniel, this is a big one. This is in a way, this is kind of like a momentous one because if memory serves, Bradley Cooper's directorial debut as Star is Born was one of the first movies that we saw in theaters together
Yes.
at college. So this is kind of a little come full circle moment as we break down his second feature filmmaking debut for Netflix, Maestro, in which he portrays Leonard Bernstein. We're also going to be talking about Hayao Miyazaki's 11th feature film, The Boy and the Heron, his return to the big screen after 10 years, which also is a full circle moment as we did our Studio Ghibli episode back in September. 5 years.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, the fact that it's been 5 years since we saw, I mean, Bradley Cooper hasn't been in anything since A Star is Born, really, right? I mean, well, I'm sorry. He was in Nightmare Alley. He was in Nightmare Alley, but...
And he has a very memorable cameo in
Licorice
Dungeons
Pizza.
and Dragons.
And Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah.
Which cracked me up because I was like, this looks so dumb. But
I love how I
anyway.
tried to make a point that completely just undercut myself. Story of my life right there. But dude, I think it's safe to say this is the one we were all waiting for. You know, obviously after A Star is Born, he didn't unfortunately win anything for that, but he was riding so high after that movie that after that, they were like, yeah, you could do literally anything. And it's funny because Dustin and I literally talked about this last night when we were doing our Bradley Cooper Hall of Fame, which is that like Bradley Cooper, after A Star is Born, if he had won the Oscar for A Star is Born, he might have done The Hangover 4. So whether or not him not winning the Oscar for A Star is Born was a good thing or not, I know a lot of people have already come out of the woodwork and say, and you know, at least a lot of my friends are like, oh, it's okay. Oh, it's Oscar bait. And I find myself running into a very, very similar conflict we ran into a lot in college, which is like, what defines Oscar bait? Because let me tell you something. This is one of the best Oscar bait movies I've seen in years. It really, really is. Because, man, I mean, I don't want to spoil my thoughts too early, but man, I freaking love this movie. I love this movie. So go into your thoughts, right? What was it you were looking forward to the most? Like going into this, like what was your level of anticipation? Where did you think this was gonna like rank out in Bradley Cooper's filmography? What are your thoughts on Bradley Cooper actually as an actor? I realize I don't think we've actually ever had like a whole lot of talk about him.
Wow, that's a lot, but I can answer all of that.
I know you can. That's why I threw it at you.
Yeah. So, okay. So first off, I think it's crazy. 5 years. I didn't even realize that, that connection, even though, I didn't forget about it, but that's pretty amazing that we're here in this moment talking about this.
Yeah.
Now, Bradley Cooper, I think obviously beginning in the 2010s really started to surprise a lot of people how great of an actor he is. And we saw that first, I think, with Silver Linings Playbook, which still might be my favorite performance from Bradley Cooper, believe it or not.
It was our number one on our Hall of Fame last night.
I mean, you can't really go wrong with it, man. Obviously, he had the misfortune of going up against Daniel Day-Lewis that year, so understandable why he didn't win the Oscar. But, ever since then, American Sniper, I think he's very good, and I would have given the nomination to someone else. But also American Hustle, he's great in. I'm blanking. A Star is Born, of course. I thought out of everyone who was nominated that year, I would have picked him to win personally. But then again, I still think he would have done Hangover 4 regardless, because he's saying, oh yeah, I'd love to do it. So that's kind of cool. And I really like The Star is Born. I mean, you remember, I didn't quite love it. I thought the second half really kind of dragged a bit, though it does, lead to a very powerful conclusion. And I think he's, yet again, the fact that he hasn't won an Oscar at this point, like he's gone way past, when Leo was saying, oh, he's overdue for an Oscar, because what, he was like, that was like his 5th nomination, right?
Yeah, Revenant was Leo's 5th.
Yeah, so it's like Bradley Cooper, I mean, he hasn't been maybe quite as nominated for acting wise, but he is on 9 nominations and he still hasn't won. And so, obviously he's going hard for the Oscar. There's no doubt about it. But you watch him in interviews in to me, I think he really strikes me as not only a fairly genuine person, but someone who really cares about the craft of film and movie making. I mean, he started out as an actor and then he found his passion for directing. And obviously, I mean, we'll get into it, but you can see that in like every single frame of this film. And so I was excited, especially seeing the trailers, because I was like, okay, from a filmmaking standpoint, this blows A Star is Born out of the water. And the fact that literally, as you said, everyone was like, oh, he can make movies now. Spielberg literally said, you need to do this movie, which is crazy. And, I will have to say about Bradley Cooper, I don't understand why people are giving him flat. Oh, he went so hard for this role. Look, even if it's not your favorite type of performance, I mean, this man like dedicated 6 years of his life for one scene in particular. And what have you guys done? Huh? Have you done that?
And well, I mean, I'll say right now, first and foremost, that 6 years trade paid off, because that scene, that scene in particular could have gone so wrong in the hands of somebody who wasn't taking it as seriously. And man, he put the work. I think the story of Bradley Cooper is just ultimately like one of success, where he is one of the few movie stars that has been able to like transcend like the typecasting that they tried to put him in. You know, like when he's first starting out, he's playing like, you know, kind of like the asshole in rom-coms. Then he kind of transitions, it becomes like more nuanced, and he starts to get a little, you know, then you have like his, what I call like his action comedy phase, you know, from Hangover to A-Team to Limitless. And then starting in 2012 with Silver Linings Playbook, he starts to get like a little bit more vulnerable, you know, and it has like a string of like really successful and award caliber performances. And then, like you said, it peaks with ultimately him having one of the more successful directorial debuts, you know, presenting himself as a filmmaker. You know, I think there's really, if you look at the list, it's really very few movie stars that have been able to seamlessly make the jump into directing. I mean, there's more, but Robert Redford and Ben Affleck are really two of the only ones that come to mind when I think of that. And how he does it so seamlessly. And like, it's just an example of putting in the work and seeing it pay off in the best way possible. And regardless of whether or not this was his Gimme an Oscar movie, I will admit, obviously, it does check off a lot of their boxes. Just like, there's just a creativity and a freedom, fun that goes into this that I just don't typically find with most quote unquote Oscar bait movies. You know, a couple of my friends were also saying that, like, oh, Bradley Cooper saw Kate Blanchett in Tar and was like, I got to do that. I personally, I didn't get that at all. I didn't get that at all. I didn't see that at all. This was a totally different type of examination, a totally different type of character study. This was somebody who was like trying to grapple ultimately with like who they are as a person versus like, you know, the love they have for other people, which is so fascinating because like when I hear like when I figure out what the base premise of this is, and it tells you pretty quickly off the bat what it's about, I'm almost like, okay, so this is not the direction I was expecting this to go in, you know, where you obviously, you know, this movie is formulated around his relationship with Carey Mulligan's Felicia character, who was again his wife of many, many years and the mother of his 3 children. And I mean, you want to talk about first and foremost just a completely different take on a love story than I've ever seen before. And this was a love story, I would say, you know, an unconventional one, but one to say the least. And man, there's just it's a lot of ups and downs. It's a lot of ups and downs, and like just every moment where I was like finding myself potentially drifting because I purposely waited to watch this on Netflix. All of my friends went and saw this in theaters early, and I'm like, I don't know. I'm just like I got a feeling for this one. I gotta wait. I need like the being, you know, dark in my room, no interruption, just focused on it. And oh my god, it's one of the most it's one of the most transcendent film experiences for me of the year. It really is. I just like had like a little pep in my step after I was done, and it's got one of the most depressing endings of the year too. I will say that, but oh man, I feel like I've rambled enough. Like, you would take it from here, man. What were your thoughts after you finished it? Like, so describe the feeling you had as soon as it was done.
Well, one thing I'll say is the ending was very abrupt, and that kind of it left a bit of a sour taste in my mouth because what I will say about this film, for like really up until that point, I was pretty much loving it. Now, granted, I'll get into my issues because this film has a handful of them, I would say. But let me say right off the bat, I mean, you know, obviously Bradley Cooper didn't get the director for or the nomination for Best Director for A Star Is Born. He is more than deserving here of a Best Director nomination. This is by far one of the most immaculately made, well-crafted films of the entire year. Like, really puts A Star Is Born to shame in that department, quite frankly. It is unbelievable, the amount that he has grown as a director, leaps and bounds, you could say. And as I said, it's evident in every frame of this film. And the performances, okay, so one thing I will say, it did take me a while to get adjusted to Bradley Cooper because in the beginning, in the 40 section, he's really kind of overdoing it. I felt, and that kind of took me out of the movie. I thought it was a bit, what does he say? A little over the top in some of that segment. But yet again, I mean, there's so much there, especially Carey Mulligan, who we will get into, that is just so beautifully rich. I mean, this is a shoe-in for best cinematography. I think, you know, I think Zone of Interest should win. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But I think this is more deserving than Oppenheimer as well. I really think just the black and white transition to color, everything about this, the cameras that he used, everything is just amazing here. But yet again, this film overall has so many standout moments to me, being some of the best of the year, whether it be small character interactions or big, bold musical numbers like the one in the cathedral, which is just absolutely stunning, that sequence. It could have gone on for, another few minutes, and I would have been completely enthralled, and all he has to do is, move the camera around and pull it back out, move it back in. It's so simple, but yet it's so effective and it's so innovative. I absolutely, love that part of the film, and the love story, between Leonard Bernstein and his wife Felicia is a very, very complex one at that. I don't agree with the criticism. People have been saying that this is a very surface level look at this marriage. I don't think so at all. Could they have gone a bit deeper? Maybe a little bit, but yet again, I think you really get a grasp of who Leonard Bernstein was as a person. He says he has so much love to give. Some of that is, a bit selfish in the way he goes about his life and especially his marriage, because Felicia had to deal with a lot, and kind of at the cost of her own career and somewhat her sanity. And honestly, as great as, because look, as the movie goes along, Bradley Cooper completely transforms into this role. I think he's more than worthy of a nomination. He probably will win. I mean, that's still up in the air. I think it's going to be him or Cillian Murphy. But honestly, Carey Mulligan gives the best performance in this movie. I think yet again, like, just the emotional gravitas she brings to this role, and what you see her do through. I mean, right from the beginning, she would never missed a beat. I felt throughout this entire film, and especially when you get to that end. Oh my goodness! Like, I love when actors can make me feel like they're going through physical pain, and Carey Mulligan does that in this film, and it is so believable and affecting, and it really just almost moved me to tears. Her performance in this, and I cannot praise her enough. But before I get into anything else, maybe you want to say a little bit more on that.
Oh man, I mean, what more can I add to that than what you already said? I mean, I couldn't agree more. Like I said, just the playfulness that Bradley Cooper brings to this, the playfulness,
Hmm.
but also just sadness that he carries around with him. I love that everybody mentions like, oh, he has so much love to give, and I think the thing that not a lot of people is going to talk about is how, despite how joyous and like, very, wiry he appears, it's like this is he portrays Leonard Bernstein as a very sad character, a very lonely
Yeah,
character, if you will. But most of the time you see that presented in film, you see that presented through a very self-destructive manner. And what I couldn't help but notice is just how wholesome he kept it. How at the end of the day, he was so committed to Felicia and to his children and to his family, despite what obviously how it was in such stark contrast to everything that he was as a person. He was like, it's weird because in a strange way, it was a different way of like portraying somebody in a cage, but at the same time, like, the way that he poured all of that into his creativity. And oh man, it's just like it's bringing tears to my eyes just thinking about just like the
yeah,
ending, how he was like right there for her right at the end. And how ultimately, right, the compelling thing is that she is the one that ultimately has to suffer for him and for the
yeah.
consequences of her choices of choosing to be with him ultimately. And even though she kind of makes that deal with herself and with him at the beginning, she fully tells him, yes, I know what you are, you know, the way that
Mhm.
like you see it, it's like the complexity of it. I'm still like having a hard time just processing it because I still saw it so recently. But oh man, like
Right. And to your point, I think it comes to head so beautifully in that argument scene, which, oh my
yes,
goodness,
all over the Snoopy.
I
Who
was
left Snoopy
glued
in
to
the
the screen.
vestibule?
Yeah. Never thought Snoopy would play such a big role
Such an
in this
important
film.
role.
Right.
I mean, it
But
makes
dude,
sense because
that
I mean Spielberg was supposed to direct this originally, right? And obviously, we know that Spielberg, I believe, is a big fan of Charles Schultz's work. So
sure. No, but it's really unbelievable how many, like, there's so many great scenes like that in this film, which is why I'm struggling so much, because I want to say I love this film, but one big thing for me that I always go on about, whether it be, when it comes to an album or film, is structure. And I'm not really a huge fan of the structure of this film by the ending, especially the first half is kind of choppy. I mean, let's be honest, like they're jumping around, especially with Matt Bomer's character, who I thought was very good in the scenes he was in, but felt like there was not really a clear there was a bit of a resolution, but not really. And also the way they jumped between the scenes when he was with him and then back, to him with Felicia, it just really didn't flow that well. I thought, and that's one of my biggest issues with the film. And of course, yet again, those are probably my few issues. And also, I have to say that REM needle drop at the end was so dumb. I was like, who
Yeah,
decided?
that
I
was
was
the
like,
one thing
come
where I'm
on.
like, this is a little distracting. I'm like,
It wasn't
this
like
is a little
subtle either.
distracting. No, no, it wasn't.
It was like Leonard Bernstein, and I was like, oh, shut up. I love that song, but like, come on,
Yeah,
really?
that's a good song too. That is a really good song.
Yeah, man. I just because there's so excuse me. There's so much that works about this film, but then you get to the last few moments and I'm like, that's it? Like I could have used another like I don't know, like maybe 7 minutes on the runtime just to flesh out that ending, man, because it just feels like it ends way too quickly. And I get, not every movie is supposed to be structured in the way that, we've come to know, but it's obvious when it feels like there are gaps with that being said. Yet again, though, I mean, technically, this is one of the most impressive films of the year. As I said, I would be more, than happy if he did get a Best Director nomination, even over someone like Alexander Payne. And I love The Holdovers way more than I do Maestro. But from a filmmaking standpoint, I just think there isn't a whole lot that reaches this level this year. Though I don't know if I can fully say that I love it, but I came pretty damn close to loving it.
Yeah, what I'll say for me is that for me, like stylistically and feeling wise, for some reason, this reminded me a lot of Mank and the work that David Fincher did there.
That's a
In
good
terms of like,
comparison.
in terms of like, the also too like how they utilize the color palette, right, the black and white in order to like with the more period piece elements which are meant to appear like more wistful and fun. They're in their youth, they're in the prime of their life, and it feels like a black and white like talkie movie, and everyone's talking like they're like it's a Humphrey Bogart thing and all that, and we're all having fun, that sort of thing. And then obviously once it transitions to color, and that's when like reality sets in, and that's when it starts to look more like a movie that would be made in like more contemporary times, like almost like smoother, sleeker, but like more like prestige on the outside, meant to cover something. I guess like a better comparison would be transitioning into the 50s, Technicolor almost. Like I've stylistically just things that like really made me take notice of that. Also, I find it interesting that you bring up structure, because structure, I remember, was something that really bothered me in A Star Is Born, particularly in the second act leading up to the third act,
Yeah.
where I thought that after that really, really strong first act, it kind of was just like, oh, we're just going to be montage and loosey-goosey. And I don't know if this is one of those things where I've just become used to it as a result of how Bradley Cooper utilizes it, or if he did legitimately improve on it. But whatever the case, it just,
I
like,
don't know.
this movie does have a lot of vignettes. It does have a lot of jumping around, but like it does seem to me more cohesive than Star Is Born.
Yeah,
Like all
yeah.
the points of the relationship, which as we know is the focal piece of this movie, are there, and they're there pretty succinctly as well, I would say. So I guess that's the reason
Interesting.
why it never
Yeah.
bothers me, at least like you said, until the ending, where it's like I sort of get where it's going for, but because of how unsubtle it is, and because of like kind of how fast it twists genres, that's where I'm just like, because the rest of this movie shifts genre pretty effortlessly. Like
Yeah,
it goes from
sure.
like a 50s homage talkie piece to like having musical numbers to like being like a romantic dramedy, to all of a sudden being like a heartfelt like goodbye piece. Like it jumps around in genre a whole lot. And not to mention the concert sequences, which are just a whole level in and of themselves. I mean, that one sequence where he's performing with the actual, German, I can't remember the name, but the German Philharmonic. It's like,
Mhm.
oh my God. And the fact that like he put all of that work in, 6 years of work for that one scene. I mean, man, it reeks of give me an Oscar, but man, sometimes it just works, dude. It just
Yeah,
fucking works.
it's crazy because as much as, like I wasn't fully on his wavelength at the beginning. I mean, you can tell one how much more of a trained musician he is, which is insane the amount of dedication he put in. And that's why I don't think anyone should knock him because like, this is a lot, and this is a lot you have to dedicate your life to. And the
Yes.
fact that he is so passionate about music and conducting, like, yet again, it's very, very evident in his performance. And dude, that On Town, speaking of the musical number, that was such a brilliant sequence. Yet again, one of the most brilliant sequences in the film, and the way it portrayed the dynamic between Leonard and Felicia, and in such a metaphorical way, in such a visual way. I was like, this is so fucking brilliant. And yet again, the movie has so many moments like that. And I definitely think the second half plays a lot smoother than the first, for sure, until that ending, I
Right.
think. But yeah, that's why I'm struggling with this, man, because it is a great film. I just don't know if I fully love it to that level.
Yeah, I get it. It's tough. It's really tough. For me, like I said, and I know I've talked about this before, but like even if a film is flawed, if it's got like a majority of things that just like hit me right in the heartstrings, which this movie absolutely did, I'd just be like, I'm just more willing to like forgive its flaws. So we do have one more movie to talk about before we wrap this section. But before we do, Nathaniel, your final thoughts and star rating for Bradley Cooper's Maestro.
Sure, and one more point I wanted to
Yes,
mention.
please do.
I think I was actually thinking about Mank when because I feel very similarly to Mank. Like, I really, really like it. I think the filmmaking is amazing, but I think the structure of it kind of holds it back for me. But yet again, I thought David Fincher should have won Best Director that year, regardless, because it's so spectacular. And I am kind of rooting for Bradley Cooper to win a couple, even though if you asked me, let's see if he gets nominated. Coleman Domingo, I think, should win. But if not, Paul Giamatti, I would both put over him. But yet again, this is very, very deserving of an Oscar. And obviously, he's trying hard to get it, and he put in the work. So, props to Bradley Cooper for that. And yeah, this is, I wouldn't say it's disappointing at all. I was hoping that this was going to be one of my top 10 favorite movies of the year, to answer your question at the beginning of this episode. But unfortunately, that's not the case. Still, I'm going to give it a very, very, very high 4 out of 5. I mean, this really is a spectacularly made film, and I can see this being anybody's or one of their favorites of the year for sure.
Well, it is one of mine because I'm giving this a very strong 4.5 out of 5. This is my
Mm,
number 2 favorite of the year after
wow,
Oppenheimer. Yeah, I
that's
loved it.
wild, man.
I loved it. I freaking loved it. Again, all the points that you made about it, 100% on point, on the money. But man, any movie that has me like smiling that much after I finish it is doing something right. So yeah,
I can't
Maestro
argue that, man. Yeah.
officially my number 2 of the year. So now, Nathaniel, oh man, we've been circling this. We have been trying to talk about this. So I've been trying to talk about this freaking movie on a podcast with somebody for weeks now, and we were finally talking about it in full circle conjunction with our Hayao Miyazaki Hall of Fame that we made back in September. His 11th feature film, The Boy and the Heron, finally, also previously known as How Do You Live, finally hit theaters this past weekend. And man, I mean, I don't know about you, it was everything that I was hoping for and more. As my first
Sure.
Miyazaki movie that I've ever seen on the big screen, man, did this deliver. Oh, I absolutely loved it. It's everything. It's not delivering anything that you haven't seen before if you're familiar with Miyazaki's work, but God damn it, he just knows what he's doing, and he knows how to do it better than anybody else. He really does, in terms of like the entering into the fictional world as a metaphor
Hmm.
for a tragedy that the main character has suffered, in this case, the loss of his mom, tying back into World War II, a bunch of crazy, fantastical creatures, and unbelievable dubbed English voice cast. I mean, what more is there to say about it? I mean, it's everything that us as Miyazaki fans could love. It really is.
Yeah, man. Well, I have an interesting history with this film. So I originally saw it at the Toronto International Film
Right,
Festival,
right.
a couple days after premiere, and I loved it then. But I was like, this is one of my favorite Miyazaki films, which isn't saying much because it's still fucking great. But I was like, I need to see this again because it could replay better for me or it could replay worse. Now I went and saw the subtitled version again, and I don't know what it was. It must have been what I ate, but I was falling asleep that time. I was not as into it, but I'm like, that's not fair to this movie. Like, I really wanted to get more clarity because I was a little tired during my test screening, but not enough that, it really brought it down for me. But I decided to go and see it a third time, this time the dubbed
The
version.
dubbed version. And it made all the
And
difference. I'm telling you.
yeah, I don't know, man, because I think genuinely it was because I was in a much, better, frame of wellness, you could say, and I was really looking forward to it. I was energized, and yet again, I didn't as much as I did love it at TIFF, I didn't think it was one of my absolute favorites of the year, but, I mean, that third time's a charm, man. I mean, this absolutely is one of the best movies of the year, one of Miyazaki's best films, and I wouldn't even put this in my top 5, Miyazaki. That's how great of a director he is, and that's how great of a film this is. Yet again, like you said, the way he, builds these very mystical, fantastical and surreal worlds, especially, emphasis on the surreal because that is totally what is this film is. And I went and saw it with one of my friends who didn't really like it, which I was like, I don't know how you can't like this movie. And yet again, is one of those movies that I don't think we should discredit it just because it's challenging, because this is not an easy movie in the slightest. Like there is a lot of stuff going on here, and it's very, very in tune with that, surreal storytelling, conveying ideas that aren't necessarily like. But that's the beautiful thing about it. Miyazaki isn't beating you over the head with what the story's about, unlike something like Barbie, for instance. And I think it lets you, digest it in a much more thought-provoking way because you're like, "Okay, like, I understand what he's doing." And to your point about it, not being anything new that we've seen from him before, I think on that note, it's a beautiful combination, or a beautiful cross between Spirited Away and The Wind Rises. I think, in the way the story is framed and thematically speaking, I mean, especially with the World War II stuff, but also the very surreal world where you're kind of moving through this very impressionistic landscape with all these colorful characters, and it really melds the two in such a beautiful way. And what I've heard is Miyazaki's most personal film, and you can absolutely tell that as well. Being a child in Japan in the 1940s during World War II, there's a lot that he can find within Mahito, the lead in this film, as much as many other characters. And also, on the note of the dub, not to say that I liked it more, but dude, Robert Pattinson, what the hell?
Right?
Like I didn't even recognize him, man. He
Right?
he really he channels the voice acting in the sub version or in the original version, and it's honestly unbelievable. And also, I have to mention real quick that the scene with Willem Dafoe, I don't know if we're getting into spoilers at all, but that scene, I wanted to laugh my ass off when he said, "Oh, he was like a brave bird," because I'm like, this is the guy who literally like thrashed the shit out of a seagull in the lighthouse, and here's Willem. It's just
Right. No, that
that
that that
connection was
okay, you
so
know what?
funny
I
to
didn't even realize that. And that's hilarious that you pointed that out because
me.
that's great.
Amazing turnaround, but yeah.
Yeah, right? Oh, how the turntables.
But now, before I say anything, I want to hear more of your thoughts on this film because I know you were
Man,
very,
I
very excited for this
oh
for a long
man, just
time.
I mean, first of all, I was just riding high off the fact that I finally got to see a Miyazaki movie in theaters. That was just magical in and of itself. And I mean, like, there's not too much I can say on it in terms of like that, like in terms of separating it from like the rest of Miyazaki's work, because you're right, it very much is pulling influences from the rest of his work, and there's not too much here that is different from what I have seen before. But what I'll say is again, just like the tugging on the heartstrings, the familial connection, like obviously,
Mhm.
I love it when like a character gets to go on a journey after they've lost a loved one and they get to spend like, have that like that little time left with them, like in a weird way. This is gonna sound like a ridiculous comparison, but bear with me. But I'm reminded of Tron Legacy because again, what I listen, I swear.
Hey, I haven't seen it, but that is
I
kind of
listen,
strange.
but the whole point of that movie is the fact that this kid feels like his dad disappeared at like the moment of at the moment when he needed him the most, and he like spent most of his adult life without him, and he gets to have like one last hoorah adventure with him before his dad ultimately sacrifices himself. And this is kind of a similar
There's the
thing
movie.
where it's like, even though he doesn't realize that the chick that the little girl that he's with will eventually grow up to be his mom in this like mystical, fantastical world and all of that. And like, was this originally set up by the grand uncle? Who knows? But just that like the fact that this character went on this massive journey to find closure, right? It's why I usually say that like Miyazaki is very heavily influenced by a lot of the dark fantasy that came out in the 80s, because I find that to be all over his work. But I think he does it one step better in the sense of how he utilizes it all as, like I said, allegories and metaphors for massive growth and tragedies that main characters have to get over. You know, the idea of, you know, Howl's Moving Castle, which is the idea of this woman who is just trying to find love, and Spirited Away, which is this girl who's trying to save her parents. And I mean, come on, like how many other, you know, entering into magical worlds has, you know, obviously My Neighbor Totoro is more so just on like, you know, the childlike wonder of it,
Right.
rather than necessarily having like one kind of overarching thing. But like this one, man, like this was like just the right balance to me of like heavy, but also like light and fun, because oh my God, the shit with the freaking parakeets and how they were like, that was something.
Where they just started shitting over it, all over everything. That was great.
And also just when they just had the kitchen set just like ready to go, it's like, oh, here, get on this table, nothing bad will happen. Like this is some stupid shit like that.
And that's the thing, man. Like, I think the reason I especially loved it. I mean, first off, do we even have to say how great the animation is?
Oh no,
I mean,
but that should be, yeah, that's known at this point.
Spectacular.
Oh my
Dude,
God.
like, just the way he draws the fire. I was like, oh my, I remember the first time I saw that at TIFF, I was like, oh my goodness, that is just absolutely insanely beautiful. But yet again, every single frame of this film is just filled with vibrancy. It's so creative. It's just everything. Like, yet again, I don't think there are many filmmakers that have stretched their creativity to this level, because there's not every single image in this film is like absolutely arresting. And the fact that you know this is all hand drawn makes it even more impressive. But also, like, I think this might be Miyazaki's funniest movie.
It's up there.
Especially
It's
with the
definitely up there.
heron.
I had some hard laughs in this movie. The whole theater did. Like every time the heron talked, and like me realizing that was like, I knew it was one of those things where, again, I knew it was Robert Pattinson, but like I had to like get myself used to that, because I'm like, oh my God, this is Robert Pattinson. This is so effing weird. And then obviously, like I said, the scene with Willem Dafoe, everything that Dave Bautista's like lead parakeet was doing was just like, it was so silly how it's like, how is this big ass bird following them and nobody hears him? Everything that Christian, also we haven't even talked about Christian Bale
is
as
so
the dad,
funny in this.
who was like so over the top, but in like such a like an endearing way. I mean, come on.
I love that Christian Bale has been allowed to like kind of play himself now. Like
Right?
every single role, like Robert Pattinson transformed in this movie more than Christian Bale did. So
Right.
it did take me a while to recognize. I was like, oh wait, that's Christian Bale, because I thought it was Idris Elba, and I was like, wait a minute, Christian Bale was in this, and I was like, oh yeah, that's him.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
even so, yeah, dude, and just the themes that it gets into as well. Yet again, it is very much it draws a lot of parallels, not only to the fact that this story is essentially about, you know, this kid trying to, as you said, find closure with his mother and accept his new, you know, family. And I think that's really beautiful, and especially the way they wrap uh things up in this film. But also it has a lot to say about, I think, World War II. There's a lot of parallels. Like,
Absolutely.
I think, yet again, the sequences in this film are so creative. It's very similar to Spirited Away in that sense, where you're like whisked to like one very interesting setup. And also, dude, the Wara Wara next Studio Ghibli plush.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
telling you right now, those
absolutely.
things were so
Those things were
adorable, man.
so cute. I was, and almost did it almost feel like he was taking shots at the Last Jedi with the student with the poor girls with that thing. It kind of did, didn't
It's better.
it?
It's
Way better, way
because this
better.
movie's better. So, but dude, yet again, like, there's so many, and I don't hate it, but regardless, I mean, it's pretty obvious. And yet again, there's so many breathtaking sequences, like when they're going up into the sky, and you know, also what that whole sequence might represent. I think that may draw some parallels to, you know, utility of the war, and also the people who were sent to perpetuate it. And at least that's what I got out of it. I could be wrong on that interpretation, but I think it's pretty safe to assume that there might be a bit of that. And yet again, this has been pointed out in a few reviews. Like, he is very, very you know, hesitant about how he feels about the darkness in this world, but yet all his movies, humanity kind of prevails, and I think it's so beautifully done here, especially near the ending. I was like, wow, that is just so beautifully written, and so powerfully evocative. Yet again, like I don't know, maybe it was I was a little bit tired the first time, but this really is one of not just one of the absolute best animated films of the year, but one of the absolute best films of the year. Only things I could criticize it on. Yet again, I think this approach the story is not done as well as Spirit Away. Mahito, some people kind of said he's a bit of a blank slate, and I like him. You know, like personality
I
wise, I
don't
can see what they
necessarily
mean.
agree with that. Like, I think
Yeah,
his
I'm in the
motivation is
middle.
it's pretty strong. I think from the
Motivation
get
is
go.
strong. He's a
Yeah.
strong character, but I don't know if his personality stands out, if that makes sense. Like
Okay.
he's very well written, but his, maybe not quite to the level of Chihiro and her whole journey and what she has to do. But
Right.
then again, I also think that there's a couple moments because yet again, this is very abstract. This is very
Yeah.
surreal. And you might know what I'm talking about. There's this great cut that happens near the end of the film, but also how we got there. I was like, wait, so what just happened? Or I was
Yeah.
like, how did we
Yeah.
jump from here? You know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about,
I know
right?
what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, how did we like I'm like,
The,
was
the
it
movie,
was it
I
like a
definitely will
dream
say,
or
the movie definitely will say plays around with your perception and your understanding of those
right?
types of tropes from those stories, for sure. Like, there's a lot of like I particularly found that there was a little bit of Alice in Wonderland in here as well, where it's like, oh, different versions of characters that we've already met, but you may not realize it, and it's only through the main
Mm,
character realizing that you realize that too, and kind of the
sure.
whole logistics and rules, whenever you travel around magical dimensions, that's always going to be weird. But I think what I really appreciated about that is how like it results in the total destruction of the fantasy in order to bring you back
Mm,
toward the reality. Most of the time it's like, oh, the character wakes up and it was like a dream or something like that. No, not this. Like, I think that like what they're doing here is like, oh, this happened, but like you're actually watching like the physical destruction of it. It's like, yeah, you're gonna forget
right.
about this anyways. So like that is like kind of what solidified
Damn.
it in my
Yeah.
mind. It's like more of like
Damn.
a mature take on something, a literal destruction rather than a more metaphorical one, which is what we've seen so many times before.
Right, but you can choose not to take part of that.
Exactly. It's
That's the thing
ultimately
that's so
right. That's the
brilliant.
beauty. It's your choice at the end of the day. That's kind of where, like, again, like the magic of like, yeah, this movie is still for you. God, I love Miyazaki so much. He's
Oh,
the fucking best.
so good, man.
He's the
Like yet
best.
again, this is a film that just gets better every time I watch
Oh
it.
man.
And
Oh,
so it's tough, man, because if this doesn't make my top 10 of the year, that tells you how great
yeah.
this year was
Yeah,
for
like,
movies.
dude,
Because oh my
2023.
goodness,
These are the movies that I'm currently battling between. Just to give you an idea, right now, Boy the
right?
Heron, Killers of the Flower Moon, American Fiction, Godzilla -1, Across the Spider-Verse, Zone of Interest, May, December, The Holdover, Saltburn, Fair Play, Maestro. Like, good God, I gotta pick 10 movies out of that. Jesus
Yeah,
Christ.
and I haven't even seen like Poor Things or American Fiction or Iron
Poor
Claw yet,
Poor
which I'm
Things
very
fell
excited about.
right outside of it. Fell right outside of
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Well, I'm excited. I have a feeling that that might end up being my favorite Yorgos
Yeah.
film. But besides the point, obviously, I think that I forgot what I was going to say. I'll come back to it in a minute. You can talk, and then it will come back to me.
Yeah, no, agree. Well, like I said, as far as time wise, we're running a little bit low on time. So in terms of, but like I said, this has just been it's been so much fun, so much fun. Again, a
Yes,
come
man.
full circle moment for both of us. Like I said, this is
That's what
gonna
I was
be
going to say. Yeah, yeah. So,
yes,
so what I was going to say on that note, I'm really glad you had me on here because my original review for this film, I was like, I still loved it, but I was, a little bit lower on my score. So this time around, I'm going to give it a 4.5 out of
yeah,
5. I mean,
yeah,
this is one of the absolute best of the year. One of Miyazaki's best, which is also saying a lot.
right,
Yet
yeah. Let me
again,
let me see where I
not
had
even
this.
my favorite.
Right, yeah. Let me see where I had this ranked for him, because yeah, you're right. Oh man, just
I
I
have it ranked
love
at
this.
6.
Yeah, I have it ranked at okay. Right now, I have it ranked at 9, but it could go higher. It could go higher right now.
That low?
Well, I Spirited Away, Totoro, Kiki's, Wind Rises, Castle in the Sky, Nausicaa, and Mononoke over it, but it might go up a couple spots. Like I said, it's tough, man. It's tough. It's like all
Rewatch, man.
masterpieces.
Yeah. It will definitely grow on you because
Oh
I
yeah,
I am
no.
testament to
Dude,
that.
it's already been growing on me. It's already been growing on me. God, I'm not looking forward to doing my top 10. Nathaniel, it was great
Me
having you
neither.
on, dude. I had an absolute blast with this. This may end up just functioning as parts 3 and 4 of the podcast because they were just so in depth, I feel like, with both of them. And also, again, credit to you, man. I know I've said this to you a bunch, but credit to you in terms of how much you've grown since obviously I met you and your knowledge and
Thank you.
understanding of films. I'm telling you, it never ceases to impress me. Where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
Well, thank you for the kind words, Dom. It's always appreciated, and it really means a lot to me. But yeah, if you guys have been watching already, you should know. You can find me at Nathaniel Ahart on YouTube, as well as Nathaniel underscore Ahart on a lot of social media platforms. But definitely going to be a lot of. This was actually my first time talking about Maestro as opposed to Boy and the Heron. So my review that is going to be up. You've seen this, so you got it right here. But definitely going to be a lot more reviews coming soon for things, Iron Claw, what have you. It's going to be a great next week for movies, and yet again, the train is still running, and I'm excited to see what this year has left to offer.
Movie number 4 of the wrap up, the big one, the finale. Again, this is going to be the longest podcast episode that I've ever recorded by the time this is done. We are here to talk about A24's final movie of the year, The Iron Claw, directed by Sean Durkin, the true to life biopic of the Von Erich wrestling family and the tragedies that befell it, starring Zac Efron. And I am joined by not only a movie fan, not only two of the biggest wrestling fans that I possibly know, and that's going to add a lot of important context to this as well, but one of my oldest friends. Again, and it is my goal in life to bring all of my regular people from my life into my podcast as well, so that we can just make connections and do the thing that we keep saying that we're going to do. It. Willie Brooks, what is up, my brother? I'm so happy to have you here finally.
It's very glad to be here, Dom. It's been a long time coming, man. How many years has it been? Like
5 years. 5 years.
And
6 if you count when we met, fall 17.
Yeah, that's true. But it's good to be here, man. Honestly, I'm so happy to see you. I'm very happy.
Yes, and it's going to be a good episode regardless. And of course, like I said, the movie and wrestling aficionado here calling directly from his car, fresh out of the movie as well. This is a very unique take, and Mac, I'm glad you hopped on. Mac Movie Reviews, also one half of the K&M podcast. Mac, what's going on, man? Good to have you back.
Hey, what's up? I'm driving angrily towards home right now, and I didn't know that this movie was 2 hours long, so I'm in my car right now on the way home. You messaged me. I felt bad, like, oh, no, I don't want him to wait, 30 minutes to get home. I'm about to be on the mobile. This is the first breaking new ground, testing a new format. We're ready to go. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to do this.
I couldn't have phrased it better myself, Max. So happy that you were able to make it. As we are about to talk about, again, guys, I can't believe it. 2 A24 movies for 1 week. The Iron Claw, directed by Sean Durkin. And you would think that I would be burned out right now, but after watching this movie and see just how fucking good it was, I was just like, okay, I immediately cannot wait to get on and talk about it. I don't even care who I'm talking to. I just want to talk to somebody about it. So, guys, I want to start off with the point of wrestling movies, right? Mac, I think you and I can safely agree that the last probably great wrestling movie that we got was 2008's The Wrestler. Would you agree?
I would say, yeah, if you're going to go from that perspective of wrestling with the whole quote-unquote sports entertainment, thank you, Vincent Kennedy McMahon, I'd say maybe the last good, pure wrestling movie besides The Wrestler has to be Foxcatcher.
Yes, I could not agree with that more. Indeed. Yeah, Foxcatcher, that's an interesting one, especially because that's another one that is more so about the psychology behind wrestling, right? That's actually a really good comparison that you bring up, because I find that probably the best elements of this movie come from a combination of those. You have The Wrestler, which is the more physical impacts that it has in your body, and then you have Foxcatcher, which is the more psychological aspects that go into it as well. And what's so interesting about the Iron Claw, as far as in a weird way acting to this third part of this already kind of pre-established trilogy, is the Iron Claw meshes both of those together. It has the physical damages and the physical toll that it takes on one's body, but it's also about the mental edge as well, the mental screwing around, if you will, and impact and pressure that it places on you, and kind of mixes them together and makes it all come from one of the worst places possible, that of your father, your figure that is supposed to lead you and guide you throughout this life. And this is one of the most interesting exercises in terms of showing not just physical impact, but just mental impact, especially from a family member. I found that this movie's way of dealing with mental health was insanely to the point in terms of capturing just its treatment during that time period, and I mean, just I'm kind of mind blown that again, I'm 4 nights in and I'm still just getting blown away every time I watch movies. And it brings up another point that I'm kind of pissed about. And Mac, I'm gonna need you to comment on this as well. Mac, why do they keep doing this to us? Why do they keep saving the best movies of the year possible, and they end up just all dumping them within a 1-2 week period? There's no possible way that people could unless you're living in the cities and are a movie fan like us, can go and see this many movies at a time.
I think the big problem with it too is that a lot of movies that we want to see that are turn out to be good, because I did enjoy the Iron Claw, we'll get into that later, but a lot of the movies they want to try to wait and kind of beat the whole beginning of the year. Like there could be some Oscar winners or some award nominees, like we see this year, like Barbie and Oppenheimer pretty much dominating everything. So I think with the Iron Claw, like even from the trailer and just knowing it's A24 and the quality it made, I think they just really wanted to save this towards the end, just in case, like if it didn't get well received. Well, it's well received, but it's like they want it to just not be competing with anything substantial. Because what else is out? Who the fuck's gonna see Aquaman: The Lost Kingdom? No one gives a shit.
Yeah, the Aquaman comparison is also pretty good as well, especially given that I feel that movie was actually originally bumped for a different movie that also then ended up getting bumped for this weekend. Yeah, there were like a decent amount of movies, you know, like the fact that, like I said, I was talking about Wonka last weekend and just how like kind of weird that that opening strategy was in terms of how it bumped Aquaman up the list. But again, like the fact that a major DC well-budgeted, like over $100 million budgeted movie is getting bumped a week, like should tell you where we are as far as the movie industry goes. But I do find it interesting, though, A24's release strategy around this, as far as this being like their big Christmas push. You know, they don't do it super often, but when they do, they usually try to put a big push behind it. And honestly, outside of Zac Efron, I don't quite see where this could go, because like this movie, yes, it is a conventional movie, but it's a very sad. It's very, very dark in terms of where it goes in the last half. It's like pure, just like engrossing treatment of of mental health, and like the physical toll that it takes on you is just kind of nuts. And I guess kind of where I'm concerned about as far as the strategy went is, I'm like, I feel like in a strange way this almost would have been like a perfect summer release, because like think about how much money and how much traction Talk to Me got. What if this had been like released as like an interesting counterpart to that, maybe in like an August or something. I think it could have done like some really interesting and good business, especially if it's led by Zac Efron. That can open at any time of the year and it'll do well.
Well, okay, I want to ask with Willie too, because he is a wrestling fan as well. You got to think about like the season when you're releasing the movie, because with the wrestling right now, the business is very booming right now. WWE is its hottest right now. AEW, for all its gas, it's still still popping. So I think right now, and to think about it right now, because this is technically in a way a WWE film, because their whole WCCW, that catalog's owned by WWE, so they had to use gold to WWE. They have a hand in this film. So right now, WWE is very we're on the road to WrestleMania. So there's this season of, hey, you're a wrestling fan, you're looking for wrestling content. Hey, Royal Rumble's coming up. How about you go see the Iron Claw as well too? So it's like a big double decker, just like to see what you want to do.
Yeah, Willie, what's your take on all that?
Honestly, it's a great opportunity altogether. Like the casual wrestling fan will just sit here. They might pick and choose if they want to watch this or not. I still haven't seen the actual movie, but I'm actually really invested in watching it. The Royal Rumble really is around the corner too, so you are right about that. To be honest, I forgot that WWE owned the right to that, because the whole Monday Night Wars thing, purchasing WCW, it all is way down the line, but it all led up to that moment, really. Can you guys like talk to me? Oh,
yeah.
Okay, sorry. Can you guys like talk to me a little bit, sort of about what was really going on in Iron Claw?
Yeah, so basically, in terms of long and short of it, as far as breaking down what the movie actually is about, it's centered on the family, right? And kind of like it's like the movie starts off as far as like kind of day in the life, like this is kind of how they originated, and then obviously how they end up growing up and how they each like sort of one-on-one get into wrestling. It's centered around Zac Efron's Kevin. His character first, before it kind of transitions into the other brothers as well. You have his brothers, David and Mike, that are living with him. Mike is not involved in wrestling at all. David is kind of like a wannabe wrestler. Then you have their brother Kerry, who's the one portrayed by Jeremy Allen White from Shameless. He's the one who was auditioning for the Olympics, but because of the U.S.'s decision to pull out of the Olympics in, I believe it was 81 due to the Cold War, is forced to come home, and he also ends up getting involved in wrestling. And so basically you have like this like fun like montage of like the three brothers wrestling and doing it together, and like the one, and like kind of like how they like each measure up and change in their father's eyes. Like he straight up says it at the beginning of the movie. He's like, oh, you guys all measure up to me at a certain place. You guys, like, you all have your rankings, but like that can change at any time, so you basically have that as the setup. And from there, you basically have it where each one of these brothers is putting like so much pressure on them, and the only one that like bothers to try and have a normal life outside of the family and outside of wrestling is Zac Efron's character. The thing about it is that the other brothers are like, they're at different levels of maturity. They're in different levels of their lives. They're at different ages, so like by the time they like get into wrestling, it almost becomes like drug, this thing that's just keeping them crawling back until it eventually picks them off one by one, as is also the case of the true story. And I guess this is a spoiler if you're not aware of the true story, but basically how it happens is that all of the brothers, except for Zac Efron's one, end up dying in increasingly tragic ways. And the entire last 30-40 minutes of the movie is just all just kind of misery porn, but they throw in a couple of moments in order to stagnate here and there. And I feel like that basically sums up the plot of the movie. Mac, you think I missed anything?
Well, I mean, yeah, you kind of hit it on the point for being it is very tragic and not knowing the real story, because if you don't know, Vice does this series called Dark Side of the Ring, and this was one of the topics that they covered back in season 1. And I've known about the story. See, I've been watching wrestling for 15 years, and they got inducted to the Hall of Fame in 2009, and that's when I learned the story. And it's a very, very sad story, and the way that they portray this in film, I was interested to see, because it's something where you're gonna have to be prepared for just a worst case scenario, and it could really just fuck you up. And
yeah,
it is very interesting to see how they portray, because I've heard a lot of wrestlers and shoot interviews and everything like that. They always say once you are in the business, it takes a lot for you to get out. Look at someone who's in the film, Ric Flair. He is 77 and he's still in the ring. He had his last quote-unquote match last year where he bled. This man's on blood thinners. He doesn't need to wrestle. But once you get it in your system, it's done. I think Iron Claw is a good portrayal of hey, family dynamic, not good, and then you're pushing yourself so hard, it can just lead to disaster.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's the biggest thing that's shown. It's funny because one of the first images you see in this movie is Zac Efron, getting out of bed. And if I could just nerd out about him for a second there, how impressed I am with his performance in this movie. First of all, the fact that this is the biggest that he's ever been. Not only physically ripped, but bulked up, physically the biggest I have ever seen him, So that's it first and foremost in terms of how they got the builds, right? And how they each capture the builds for each of the 4 brothers, for Harris Dickinson, for Jeremy Allen White, and also comparing them to their last brother, who, as I said, is not a wrestler in the beginning, attempts to get into the business and then quickly leaves and dies shortly thereafter, But so the physicality that's captured by each one of these 3 is also contrasted with kind of the silent vulnerability that they all feel. It's all at differing levels. Obviously, you spend significantly more time with certain of them than others, but in terms of kind of how it's mapped out, in terms of how they are connected to their father, in terms of the familial connections, I kind of sort of compared this. It started out as a joke, but it kind of fits, I think, where this is the most recent Godfather / Succession of wrestling. Only in this case, it's where the dad slowly kills all the children. It's a Godfather. It's they each kind of die off in their own way before it's just left with one in charge. Succession is more of a political battle where there can only be one winner. And this one is just straight up a matter of no, the dad is so domineering that he's put all this collective pressure that is slowly killing off the kids. One by one, especially because I thought they were all going to be different, but in terms of how they each were placed in the movie and how they each ended up going out, it's okay, this makes sense, as it progressively got more and more sad.
Yeah, it's with a lot of wrestling, wrestling has more than one royal family. Shout out Cody Rhodes. It is sad because you see, there were stories about the dad being very, even they mentioned it in the Dark Side of the Ring. They said, hey, Fritz said you never miss a show. So there's there's elements of this weird, sort of living vicariously through your children, because one of the big central themes in the movie is Fritz is we're going to have the NWA World Heavyweight Championship in this household because he never got to win it and they kept screwing him. So if he pushed his sons, if one of them wins it, then he would have felt very good and be he's living vicariously through his sons. And he's just saying he's from an old school method of wrestling, because that mentality is from the Harley Race days, the Lou Thesz days, Simon, all those the old school wrestling ways, and then pass it off to your sons, and it just didn't. It's an interesting dynamic to portray in a wrestling movie, and I thought that was very good, especially telling this story.
Absolutely. Could not agree more. Like I said, it was a wholly different, unique take into wrestling that I have really never seen before. And it's one that it kind of almost made me care more about the subject matter. Like I said, besides you two, I have a lot of other friends that are also invested in wrestling. And I kind of always made me wonder why, but honestly, seeing different takes in terms of how the business is run and its effect on people. It's really fascinating to say the least, and tragic, if not that. Now, Willie, I brought you on specifically because this is an area that you were talking about to me before on this podcast about the different kind of tragedies tragedies that have befallen, some of these wrestling families in the past. I was wondering if you could just weigh in on that.
Yeah. Well, first things first, you got to understand wrestling is a business, and as all businesses, sometimes it's a little unforgiving. There's been a decent amount of families that have had to, like you said before, Mac. They tried to pass it on to their sons and everything, and then there are a few royal families. I know you touched on the Rhodes for a little bit. I do want to talk a little bit about the Rhodes, but I kind of want to start just like a little bit more recently, actually, to give you a better understanding. I'm sure you guys, well, Dom, actually, I talked to him a little bit about earlier. He isn't sure, but I know that you're an avid wrestling fan. You remember the tragedy that happened in the early 2000s with, he's a former, I'm not even going to tell you what his accolades are because he's basically Chris Benoit.
Yeah, that was 2007.
2007, yes. And with everything that happened with Chris Benoit's family, WWE actually did not take care of the family after the tragedy, right? Like they kind of just left the family high and dry to care for their own. And he left behind small children in this world. He left behind a family that had no one really to take care of them. In WWE, they kind of washed their hands clean of the whole situation. They didn't want any sort of guilty conscience like on their mind. And for the people, all the viewers who are going to see this, Chris Benoit, he was a pro wrestler who was part of a murder-suicide. He killed, I believe it was just his wife, maybe one of his children, and himself in the process. And WWE, they had a whole tribute show the day after because they found out that he was one of their top athletes. He passed away and everything, and then they found out more details as it progressed, and then they kind of realized the seriousness of the situation, and they decided to just push it away as far as possible, push it into the shadow, forget about it. And that includes the kids. And as sad as that is, that's not the first time. That's probably the most recent time I can think of people getting screwed over by family. Trying to think of other examples. Like everybody knows The Rock. The Rock's father, Rocky Johnson, he got screwed over back when he wrestled for WWF. He did it to himself, but they did him really bad because originally he was a great wrestler for WWF. But there was one time he got a little greedy. They had a different promotion that was doing something overseas, and Rocky Johnson wrestled one match for the different promotion overseas, and WWF found out about it, right? So when they found out about it, they put him in a position where he started losing all of his matches. He started getting booked specifically to lose, and not even like lose a good match. They started putting him in positions to get embarrassed publicly because they didn't like him that much, and they had the power to say so because at the end of the day, he's a human being. He needs a check. He has to do whatever it takes in order for him to get his check. So his boss would just go out there, just tell him, go out there, do what you got to do. And slowly but surely, they have him losing more and more matches in more and more embarrassing ways. Eventually, he gets cut. He starts getting desperate. He starts looking for other jobs, and he's still a wrestler at heart because wrestlers, one thing they know how to wrestle. So he starts working for smaller and smaller gigs over time, trying to really bring money to his family so they could eat. And the whole time, The Rock, he's still growing up. He's still a little kid. He sees this, and his dad kind of tells him that this is how it is. He wants him to grow up and try other things. I remember The Rock, when he was like a teenager, he actually went to the University of Miami, the Miami Hurricanes, to play football, and he tried football. I think he got drafted by the XFL or the CFL. I'm not exactly sure which league, and then it didn't really work out, so we tried wrestling, and they had a whole conversation, and they talked about this on the show Young Rock too. Like, if you guys have ever seen Young Rock, it's actually a pretty good watch. Rocky Johnson was so hesitant. He was basically angry at Dwayne The Rock Johnson for even considering going.
Yeah, I remember hearing about this when he talked about it on Rogan.
Yeah, he was so upset about The Rock even considering going into the business because of what they did to him.
Yeah, definitely. No, yeah. And like that adds like further context as well as far as like what's happened obviously throughout the history of wrestling. And it's kind of interesting because I feel like in a way, because Will, you mentioned before that like when I asked you like if you were familiar with this family, you were like, yeah, this is like, I saw this in like wrestling documentaries. It's like one of the older ones, you know? So I figured that kind of this as far as being the originator for all of those tragedies that have befallen wrestlers, obviously in the past, as you know, that would be like kind of even more incentive because kind of what's so interesting, right, about the last half of this movie is it's like half of the, 2 of the deaths are by suicide, one is by pills and alcohol and wandering into a field. Another one shoots himself in the chest, and they have this like really interesting moment right near the end where it's like, you see them like going off like on a river, like meeting the two in the afterlife, and like they see their oldest brother who died when he was a kid, because the whole movie is based around the premise of like, the Von Erich name carries this curse, which is where for whatever reason their dad took his mom's last name instead of his dad's, and for whatever their grandmother, their dad's mom, had apparently suffered a bunch of tragedies on their side. So basically, it's like you have this you have this overhanging threat of like, okay, like there's this curse that's slowly wiping us out, even though it's clearly like it's not really a curse. It's like clearly coming from a very deliberate place. But the movie kind of knows like how to balance that perfectly well. It's very, very totally totally aware of where it's going. Mac, would you agree with this?
Yeah, I would say that because there's a few things I'll talk about the movie without spoiler. Well, Willie, the whole story of the true story of this, but they definitely do a good job of saying like, hey, it's kind of dumb to think that it's curse. Because even Kevin Von Erich himself has said like it's not a curse. It's just mostly just bad luck and just like stuff like that happening like that, and that such tragic events in that order. You start to think of like, is this really like bad luck, or is there something like overarching? Because it's just we lose people every day. It's a sad fact of life, but to lose your brothers in increasingly tragic ways in the span of almost 5-10 years, that's bad.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And it's like, it's kind of the closeness of it, especially considering that this isn't the only property recently where we've gotten, kind of that final destination as people getting killed off within a relatively short period of time, or rather just dying in a relatively short period of time. We also saw that and it's always usually done like for a supernatural purpose too. Like I think this is the first time that I've seen that done for like in a dramatic film, and have it not be like kind of corny or cheesy or a little ridiculous or over the top. It's handled very well here with a lot of tact and grace and nuance, and especially it really knows how to deliver like the gut punches too, because when the deaths happen, they are sad. They are really, really sad. Like they really make you understand it by having the characters feel the pain ultimately, like of their passing. Like I was sitting there in the theater and like my mouth was just like, I was just like I felt like a corpse just like walking out. I'm like, I just have no soul left. This is just like one of the saddest things ever. Like the ending too. It's like one of these like kind of like very earnest but very well earned endings, where it's like his kids just come over and comfort him as he's just like sitting there after he's finally sold the business and just like let everything go, after the death of the last one, Jeremy Allen White's character, Kerry is his name, which I thought was relatively interesting. Like, I don't know, what were your thoughts on that, Mac?
No, that's a good way to end the movie because like, because they say Fritz says it earlier when he's like, I don't want any tears, so they weren't really allowed to grieve about it, and like, to just seeing that and being able to like just have a moment where like, all right, I'm done, I sold the business, I just want to have a family now, and and the thing with Kevin Von Erich's kids, they're wrestlers, they're tag team champions in MLW, Lee and Marshall, so it's just nice to see like them portrayed too in the movie. Is just like because I feel like in a way those two kids saved Kevin's life. Because who knew Kevin? If Kevin, he said he was in those dark places too. So if he maybe didn't have that to his name, he probably would have ended as well.
Maybe it'll be grounds for the sequel. Maybe they'll do that. That would be kind of fun. I don't know.
I don't know, but it's a good movie. I think with this, like, there are some issues with it, and I don't know if we're gonna talk about it now, but I'll save that. With another thing with it too that I like is that if you're a wrestling fan, you'll definitely like this movie because, like I said, it's for us, by us. Like, Sean Durkin obviously has a interest in the subject, and he was very deliberate in how he did things in the presentation. Like, the guy he got to play Bruiser Brody definitely looked like him. They mentioned the rivalry with the Freebirds, which is a big rivalry in the WCCW days, and and they do a good job of incorporating some real life footage too. Like when the mom was watching Kerry win the NWA title, that's actually the footage from Parade of Champions, or when they were watching the SummerSlam match when he won the Intercontinental Champion. That was really Kerry Von Erich versus Mr. Perfect in 1992 at SummerSlam. I think that was just very interesting.
Yeah, that's impressive to say the least, And what's it called? As far as flaws for you.
Okay, so Willie, I want to ask you this. You do know that the Von Erich brothers, we have Jake, Kerry, Kevin, David, and Chris, and Mike, right?
Yeah.
So Chris is not in the movie. They do not mention Chris at all. Like, he doesn't exist in this timeline. So that's the big problem I have, because Chris is another member of the family where it's like, okay, he's part of it too because he shot himself as well, but he shot himself in the head. So you're missing.
There were three brothers who shot themselves.
Yes, it was. Actually, no, two, because Carrie shot himself and then Chris shot himself. So Chris had he had a disease, but it's like he had brittle bones, so he tried to become a wrestler. But he broke his arm and he couldn't wrestle. But then he got depressed and he shot himself in the head too. But I think they asked Sean Durkin, like, why did you cut him out? And they said, well, we couldn't find a way to put him in the movie. I'm like, how do you not find a way to put him in the movie? Like, that's
what?
He's
part of the family.
Yeah, they don't. Yeah, he's the brother. Because I'm like,
wow,
I kept seeing Mike. I'm like, wait, no, that's So that's one. Another one. It's just mostly like inaccuracies, and I'm like, I'm trying not to look for those in historical biopics, but this one was bothering me because I'm like missing that. So when Mike hurts his shoulder, it was in Israel, and they did the surgery in Israel, and then he came back, and then when he came back, that's when he went into toxic shock. They kind of just said it happened all at the same time. No, he had the surgery, it was successful first, and then it was the toxic shock. Then he woke up, and then there may have been some brain damage with that.
Got it. So probably
And
just
then,
like, shrinking things for time purposes.
Yeah, and then another one too is that they don't really go over the fact of how they try to replace Von Erich. So they try to make Lance Von Erich, which is shout out to MJF, current AEW World Champion. He had a cameo in that. It was a blink and you miss a cameo, but he's Lance Von
MJF
Erich.
was
They
the
hired a
movie?
wrestler. He's Lance Von Erich. It's a blink and you'll miss a cameo, but pretty much what they try to do after, I think Mike died, or after David died and Mike was injured, they got this guy, I forgot his real name, but they named him Lance Von Erich, and they try to say like, oh, he's the long lost of Von Erich brothers, but the crowd was like, this is bullshit, he's not a Von Erich, and it just didn't work out.
Yeah, they didn't put that in the movie, probably pretty purposefully so.
I know, but it's just like, it's just stuff that I'm like, it's the Chris thing that really bothers me, because I'm like, I know you only had three brothers, and this movie already is 2 hours. I'm like, you can't add the third brother, something like that. And then I'm glad they didn't mention how the older brother died, because that's kind of tragic as well. Because how the older brother died is that he fell into a puddle and electrocuted himself.
Oh Jesus, yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So that would. Yeah. So I do like the end where it's like, afterlife and everything, but there's just like. You couldn't find a way to put Chris in the movie. Like, he's a Von Erich. He's part of the family. He's a very important
I figured
part.
at that point they were probably just like cutting their losses and being like, yeah, this this will just happen. We'll just cut this and nobody will notice or care.
I don't know. It's just very like, I mean, Sean, if you claim you're a wrestling fan, you should know Chris is a very vital part of the story. And it's like, and another thing too with Carrie, just a lot of the timelines for how they died and everything. So the way Mike died and how they portrayed the movie, that's actually accurate. He did go out in the field, he had pills, and they found him just lifeless. Like that actually happened. With Carrie though, he wasn't at the ranch when he shot himself. He had come back, and he did shoot himself with his dad's gun. That's actually true. But what happened was that Carrie went back to the ranch. He told his dad, "I love you." And he went out, he drove his Jeep out to the field. Kevin came and said, like, hey, where's Carrie at? Realized the pistol was gone. Fritz went up to the hill where they found him at. The shooting hand glove was empty, and then the revolver was there. And then the part where he shot himself in the chest is true, but one thing that was interesting in the Dark Side of the Ring episode is that when they had an interview with Fritz, and Fritz said that when they found Carrie, he had the biggest smile on his face because he looked at peace. Because, the whole motorcycle accident, that really fucked him up. Like, he could not do anything. But, like, if you watch some of his matches, like, I've watched some of his matches after the fact that we knew, and Kevin says, you look good. It's just knowing he couldn't be at full strength what he wanted to be, it really fucked him up.
Yeah, no, agreed. And the other big thing, too, also is that, I mean, if anything, I would say if I had one flaw, it's that Jeremy Allen White's character, Carrie, I would say probably does not get as much development as I would prefer. There, I feel like because his performance is mostly physical, they don't have a whole lot of talking for him. His is mostly physical. That like by the time his deterioration starts, it feels like there's like a scene like they purposely don't show the motorcycle accident, but they show the after effects of it, especially since it seems like it's gonna go in like a different direction in the trailer than what actually happens in the movie, which is where the trailer makes it seem like he dies in the motorcycle accident when in reality he just loses his foot. So it's like, wow, you have everything else on top of that to add to it, and then that eventually leads to, what we see in the ending. But I feel like it might have just been because of like how Jeremy Allen White was directed with that performance. Like I said, it's very physical, it's very hulking, it's very intimidating despite his small frame and stature. But it felt like there was just something just a little bit missing. That was probably like my one flaw or nitpick. And like also shout out to Holt McElhaney, who's been like giving the same performance for the last like 30 years and like finally like managed to use that to perform someone who's like really terrifying and menacing, as their dad.
Yeah, he was a good Fritz and everything. But the thing with Carrie, which I thought was very underutilized, because Jeremy Allen White has been killing it. Shout out to the Bear and everything. The thing with his character is that Carrie near the end was very tragic because they don't even he got arrested before he got killed because he got arrested for drug possession, and that's why he got fired from the WWF. So he got fired and he went to jail, and he was married at the time with kids because he has a daughter named Lacey Von Erich. She wrestles from time to time too. And the thing with that is just, okay, you have this, and then the thing that drove Carrie to kill himself is that he asked his wife, would you be there for me when, oh, I'm home now. Would you be there for me when I get out of jail? She wouldn't promise him that. So that kind of drove him instead, because Bret Hart mentioned it in his book, in an interview, said like a few years before that, he always said like, I want to be with my brothers. And Bret just knew that it was only a matter of time.
Damn.
So
yeah, I will say, yeah, I will say the point at the end, like that really got to me is the fact that you had like when Jeremy Allen White leaves his note, he's like, yeah, I'm going to be with my brothers. And the fact that like, I think that's kind of like the main overall selling point of the movie. And that's kind of where I'm going to leave it at that. Like I said, this is another short podcast, but I think I kind of want to leave it there where it's like that moment of it's like, even though what we just witnessed is all tragic, it's like the fact that they can finally be at peace, And we didn't even get a chance to really talk about Harris Dickinson that much. It's just how phenomenal he is in the movie. He's not in it for very long, but the moments that he is in it, he like very much holds the screen. His back and forth with Efron at the beginning is effortless, I think. And I think that like, I just wanted to give a shout out to that performance because that's a really, really good one that I thought was going to get overlooked. Lily James as well as Zac Efron's, as Kevin's wife. She's fantastic as well. She's really grown a lot as an actress, but yeah, I just got to say that like for a movie that like I really knew nothing about going in, and I'm glad I didn't know anything. I really got like a really like well-formed experience out of there, and I got like at least a holistic ending, knowing that like at the very least the rest of them were at peace. And even though Zac Efron's Kevin has to live with that burden for the rest of his life, the fact that that there still is like a form of peace of Zen that is involved. And even though it's very clear now that they compressed a lot of stuff, they compressed and left out a lot of stuff for the purposes of keeping this like just at 2 hours, I still say that for what I got, I was thoroughly moved by. I give this easy 4.5 out of 5 stars. Mac, you?
Like I said, it's just trying to get my breath back. The thing with it too with me, it's just like it is a good movie. I think Willie, when you see it, I think you'll like it. If we just ignore the inaccuracies, and it's actually a very well done movie. I know some people did you guys see IGN's review of it?
I did not, no.
They gave it a 5 out of 10.
Damn.
So I don't know what kind of weed they were smoking. I wanted, but I decided to read it. I thought it was funny, and I remembered the author. This is the same author who gave great grades to She-Hulk and the Marvels. So I'm like,
Oh so yeah, so this woman's got a whole lot of credibility going for her there.
Yeah, but it's a good movie. I feel like if you don't know anything about wrestling, but you want to have like a good emotional movie, because this movie does a good job of just being emotionally gripping to you. So it's a good drama. I still think you like it. But if you're a wrestling fan, definitely check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. The last thing that I'll say on it. Oh wait, Mac, real quick. Out of 5, what did you give it?
I'm probably gonna give it I'm stuck at a 3.5 or a 4.
Okay, got it. Yeah, for me, easy 4.5 out of 5. And like I said, I also wanted to just commemorate, shout out Zac Efron. Like, man, that guy's been killing it. Man, he really, really has, and he has improved so much as an actor, just overall. So, with that being said, Willie, you did not see the movie, but I will end it with this: did this incentivize you to definitely want to go and seek this movie out?
To be honest, I was probably gonna watch it like before this, but this is definitely like this is really, really giving me a better idea as to what really have to expect. I don't know that much about the Von Erichs, to be honest with you. My wrestling knowledge kind of stops before that. My wrestling knowledge really starts around the 90s during the Attitude Era, and it goes up to like 2010 or so before I took a break for a couple years. So learning about anything previously, it's interesting. It's interesting because it didn't start off the way that I knew it was. It started off way before that. And honestly, I just having that little bit of background information is going to be very nice.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. So Mac, it looks like Mac was able to bounce back on real quick. Yeah, that's perfect because I was literally just about to close us out. So Mac, as you're about to depart, where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
I'm so sorry. I swiped the browser up and I forgot I was still on. I was just the best. Oh my god! But yeah, you can check me out on Instagram at Mac Movie Reviews. On my TikToks, Mac_movie_reviews. YouTube, it's Mac Movie Reviews, and I have a second channel now called AJ. Did a video ranking all the Watch Dogs games, which was pretty fun. And yeah, just check me out with my name, and yeah, that's where I am.
Absolutely. And Mac, we got to have you on more podcasts in the new year, man. The few amount of podcasts that you have been on, you've been great, and it proves that you're just an equally great co-host. Man, you've got to make more room in your schedule. Got to come on for more episodes, dude. You're killing it. Keep going.
Listen, if the internet, if my internet didn't go out, I would have been on last night. I promise you that. Because it's just when you asked me that, yeah, I was just like, damn.
Yeah. Got possibly search out a better internet provider. If it's Spectrum, you're barking up the wrong tree. Just saying.
Xfinity.
Oh, that's even better. You got to upgrade to at least Optimum. At least Optimum. Willie, your first time on the podcast, dude. First off, congratulations for making it through. Like I said, I've been trying to get you on for a while. Willie, where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
I don't really have anything right now going for your social media, to be honest with you. I'm kind of taking a break. If you guys want to find me, I suggest you open up your window, shout Willie Brooks 5 times, and there's a chance I'll show up.
Movie number 5, we're wrapping it with. I mean, we couldn't think of a better movie to wrap it with. With, of course, the one, the only, seemingly the most controversial director in Hollywood right now, the one, the only, Zack Snyder, with his 10th feature directorial debut, Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire. I love how they waited until like recently to tell us, oh yeah, this movie is just going to be a Part 1. We're not actually getting the full title. I am joined by 2 people, one of whom has been on the podcast recently, just did his first appearance, one of whom has been on the podcast many times with me before. And as you guys can see, yeah, this podcast is being officially taken over. Zeta Chi Zeta, Fraternity Incorporated. That's right. Dexter, Fletcher, Lambs Armstrong, and Dante DeBlacchio, Tarantino. James, what's going on, guys? Happy to have you both here. You ready to talk about some Zack Snyder?
Sure. It's a mouthful, by the way. Yeah.
I was about to say that 10 times fast. All right, gentlemen. Zack Snyder, second full-length feature film released directly to Netflix. His 10th overall feature film. Not to mention that this is an original concept that he originally pitched as a Star Wars idea that he then decided once he got all the money from Netflix was like, okay, now I'm just going to go and I'm going to do this as my own thing. I'm going to do it in 2 parts, and there will be an extended cut of this movie that will be the 2 parts combined that will be released at a date to which has not yet been revealed. Part 1, A Child of Fire, has just been released today on Netflix. Part 2, entitled The Scargiver, will be released sometime in April. I don't remember the exact date off the top of my head. And gentlemen, so what's that?
I think it's like the 29th of April, or the 19th or the 29th. One of those
19 sounds right. But gentlemen, so naturally, this being a Zack Snyder movie, that now he is completely untethered from Hollywood. The critics were naturally going to love this, right? I mean, we all know that the critics just love Zack Snyder completely. I think this debuted at what, like a 9% on Rotten Tomatoes or something ridiculous like that. Like, even then, I was like, okay, like, even if this movie isn't that great, which it's Zack Snyder, it probably won't be like the greatest thing since sliced bread. But even that seems a little bit harsh. Like, just a little bit harsh. And now that we've all actually seen the movie, now that it's come out, can we at least agree on that? 9% is just it's a tad bit too harsh. Just a tad bit.
Yeah, I'd give it like a 20%.
Damn, still that low though. Still that low.
Not great.
I say 15. I say 15. 15 max.
Damn, 10-15 range. All right. So, yeah. So I guess in order to break this down, I mean, I feel like we'd be wasting our time if we talked about like Snyder's journey here. We pretty much already know how that ended up coming about. You know, he's gone very, very in depth. He's been promoting this movie like heavy, you know, doing all those behind the scenes bits that Netflix loves to do around this time of year. You know, this is like Netflix's next, like they're like, yeah, this is a big budget movie. They put a lot of money into this, and it shows because again, just where it counts visually, this movie's got it for sure. So with that being said, guys, obviously you both knew everything that was going to happen going into this, right? And now on the outside, well, I guess first and foremost, like, were you guys aware that this was going to be a part 1 going in?
Yeah.
Not until I clicked play, I'll be honest.
So you got Dune is what you got. You got Dune where they marketed Dune, right? And then it wasn't until the title scrolled up that it's like, oh, Dune part 1. And you're like, oh, what the this isn't even going to be the full thing. Yeah, I mean, man, movies, they love doing that with parts now. They love doing that with parts. And this is like the latest instance where it's like, yeah, it's nothing but a marketing gimmick. There's like, to me, especially on Netflix too, in theaters, okay, I get it. But like on Netflix, there's no excuse. There's no excuse as to why this should be split into parts. Like, none at all. Like, the only reason why I can think that this is because Snyder has talked a lot about kind of how, like, you know, previously working in Hollywood, right? He felt like constrained by the traditional, okay, movies have to fit into like, you know, this 2-hour long mark, especially because he always felt like there was like, oh, there's always more to tell in movies. And we know that he's a guy, he loves his director's cuts, as you guys well know. But what's interesting is that like Netflix has kind of given him the freedom to like play around with format and such, where he's like, okay, like I have this story to tell, but it's going to be a little too long for a full 2 hours. And I may want to do a little bit more, so I may want to split it up into parts, but not make it like a full-on like 8 to 9 episode miniseries, like a 3 or 4 part miniseries. It's like I want this to be more of, I still want this to have like a movie experience, but be split up into parts, you know. And like I said, this is not the first time we've seen this happen. We've been seeing the idea of movies being split up into 2 parts literally for almost a decade now, since Harry Potter really started that. But a couple things to go into this. Number one, the fact that usually whenever they try to split movies up into 2 parts, they do it for finales, for final installments of movies. Not here. This is like the first instance, right? And we saw this obviously happen a couple years ago with Dune, but Dune is a couple other things go into it. It's based off a book. The fact that the story is long and extensive enough, it could technically work as 2 parts, even though I don't necessarily agree that it does. But with all of that being said, Dante, I wanted to start with you, right? Because you and I have obviously talked a lot about Zack Snyder and our individual thoughts on him. Like, what are your thoughts on Zack Snyder wanting to do this as 2 parts? Do you agree with it? Do you at least see where he's coming from? Or would you rather they have just released it all as one big, like, action extravaganza?
I feel like he should have just released it all as one big action extravaganza because, like, I'm pretty sure we're going to get into this conversation dissecting the movie as a whole. But I just feel like there's just so many things missing from the movie, like especially this is a brand new like IP where you kind of need to handheld a little bit to get people invested in the story, because my biggest take from this is that the story makes no fucking sense. Just for like my take on it, it makes no fucking sense. And I feel like the film is trying to be like 4 different types of movies in one. And it's just like, you should have just dropped this whole thing. You should have just did your Snyder cut of the Justice League and dropped a 4-hour 4x3 movie, like if you wanted to do that. Not black and white though, please. No, that was just
Oh, what, you didn't need like the extra artistic edge on top of that in order to be like, oh yes, in order to show how even more cinematic this is, it's gonna be in black and white.
So it's like, you know, I think he should have just released the movie all at once or drop both parts like relatively closer to each other. Like, granted, April is still around the corner, like, but you should have just either just dropped one big ass movie. Especially if you knew, like, if I'm Netflix and I just watched how this movie just tanked low key, and it's not even being like review bombed. It's like it's actually tanking. It's the race between Aquaman and this right now. Like, who's tanking the worst? And I would be like, yeah, you're not getting a part 2. Like, we're leaving it at that. Like,
right. So you think that if they hadn't already made the decision to release this in 2 parts, like, yeah, it's like if they had just done like a traditional theatrical drop and dropped this all at once, right? And I guess that's a part of it, right? Is the Netflix of it all. Because you're right. If this had been like a traditional like drop, right, where this was like the first instance and then like we had to wait like a couple years for a sequel, and this had gotten like the traditional release in theaters, I gotta say, you're right. Like, this doesn't get a part 2 at all. So, Dexter, you're relatively new here. So as far as what are your thoughts on the whole, like, them deciding to drop this in 2 parts as opposed to one, them also like announcing ahead of time that like, okay, this was going to be like a 2-part event. This wasn't going to be like oh, here's one movie and no, then if it gets better, it gets the sequel.
Oh my bad, I was muted. I think that it would have been better if he combined the two parts and then took out maybe a lot of the like preposition. I think that's the word of
Exposition, yeah.
exposition. That's the word. If he took out a lot of that, because it felt like for this movie we're kind of just planet hopping, getting a new person into our little party. It kind of felt like I was playing like a video game or something, and then we had our fight at the end, which was kind of cool. It was also kind of not. Uh, so then yeah, this first movie I guess was just kind of gathering the party for like hopefully like this is like the Infinity War to the End Game, but like Infinity War was really cool. Um, yeah. Maybe he should have just like taken out a lot of this, and then if he did like a 3.5 hour movie, this should have been like the first third, and then the next 2/3 should have been the part two.
Yeah, you pretty much hit the nail on the head as far as like my thoughts there exactly, because I'm like, okay, so going into this knowing what I know about a lot of traditional like two-part typical like movie events and such, I'm like, okay, so this is going to be it. Part one is going to be, because I already knew going in, I'm like, okay, they're very much modeled this after like this is a Star Wars thing, this is a Seven Samurai thing. It's about like, okay, evil tyrannical empire coming down, preying on this poor innocent village. Now this one person who's got like a checkered past has to go out, round up a group of other outsider rebel badasses in order to like fight off the evil empire. We've seen this a million times before. Sure, it's new worlds and new characters and new IP technically, but the story structure it's been pretty well utilized. So knowing that going in, I'm like, okay, so this part is going to be like the setup, the getting the team together. It's probably going to end with some sort of a betrayal, and we're going to end ready for like the big final climactic piece, right? I guess just where my problem comes in with certain of these part ones is the fact that the way they always end, they always have to end with, it's like, okay, we're going to give you like a taste. This is going to be like an intro, like what you're going to expect from this battle, but we can't go all out just yet because we need you to tune in for part two where we're going to like really throw everything at the wall. And like, I understand why they do that, but it never... There's just always something about it that just feels really unsatisfying. Like in a strange way, I think that Dune did this much better, but I kind of feel a similar way about Dune, where Dune, you have the massive betrayal and the Harkonnens and the Emperor's forces are coming down and they're just kicking the shit out of the Atreides and you're just seeing their forces get wiped out. And then you check the time frame and you're like, wait, there's another 40 minutes left to go. Like, what the hell is going to happen? And there's some stuff that happens afterwards that is pretty cool, but it still leaves you with like, basically that movie ends with Zendaya basically turning at the camera being like, tune in next time for some even cooler shit. And I kind of got the same thing here, where it's like, you get like the 6 people, riding up on the horseback. It's like, hey, we're back at the village. Look at how cool this is going to be. And then we're going to have like a little tag at the end in order to like set up for next time, even more plot twists that are going to happen. And I'm like, oh man, couldn't we get like, don't get me wrong, the battle sequence that we got to end this was badass. I loved it. Again, from an action standpoint, Snyder knows what he's doing. But I'm like, of course you had to end it this way. Dodger, I see you waving your hands a bit. Not a fan of the action much?
You know what I was watching? Space 300.
Yeah. Not as egregious, though. I will say there was less slowdowns and more like chance for us to like appreciate the action than 300. Yeah. But I get what you're saying.
But it was like, yeah, like as soon as like the bar scene, right?
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is just fucking 300 with guns and like aliens and shit like that. So it's like I kind of agree with Dexter. Like, there's a lot of this movie is just planet hopping, like gathering the team and stuff like that, and it was just long and dragged out. And I admit, I like nodded off.
Really?
I've had to like go back and like rewind at least 8 different times.
Oh no!
On certain things, bro, because I kept nodding off at the same fucking part, and it was that bar scene. The bar scene I nodded off. The scene where I don't remember where the fuck they got Nemesis from. I'm real.
The city planet where you missed the part where they fought the Spider Woman.
Yeah,
that was cool though.
That was cool.
So
Lord of the Rings, that was cool.
So I have to go back and like rewatch it, but I was like, am I gonna nod off again? There's a lot of slow dragging points here that kind of remind me of 300, like, and it's like not just like the fight scenes with the slow mo. It's just like the pacing was just extra slow. But I was like I said before, like I felt like the movie was trying to be something else rather than just be like its own original IP. Like I felt like he pitched this as a Star Wars movie, and then whoever he pitched it to originally was like, this is dumb.
Pretty sure he pitched it to George Lucas originally.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure that's what it was.
Lucas is like, this is dumb. Like, and it's like, and the overall, like, I felt this movie was just like a really touched up bougie version of Rogue One.
Yeah, Yeah, I was getting Rogue One elements from this at points too.
I'm
for
getting
sure.
a lot of Rogue One elements from this, and I was just like, that means it's just Rogue One just sets the precedent for like kind of like a not a Star Wars movie, but it's a Star Wars movie.
Right. It's a non-Star Wars movie that takes place in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, and that's what I felt like Rebel Moon was trying to be really hard. And with a mixture of like, I got like a little Dune elements from here too, like the world building is kind of like the same thing from Dune. Just like a lot of elements came in, and they're just like it clashes with each other. It doesn't symbiotically just work. It just there's a lot of clashing between, and also just I'm not a huge fan of the main character. Like,
yeah,
she just I feel like, first of all, Dimogene, like General Titus.
Yeah,
like, I was like, I want to like you, but like I need a little bit more from you. So I'm like, maybe we'll get that in the second movie. But like, I just didn't feel anything for these characters. Blood Axe died, and I was like, oh well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like we just got him. It's like, oh, it's Ray Fisher. It's cool seeing him back, and he looks like badass with the long dreads and everything. You know, you almost recognize him with the cyborg voice. Then he dies, and you're like, oh shit, okay. No, you're right. It was literally just like, okay, planet hopping, space hopping. We're gonna collect all these characters. Oh, here are a bunch of, you know, they're kind of also relying on it's like you to like recognize their faces too, because like you said, you got Sophia Boutella, you got Charlie Hunnam, you got both Dario Naharis's too for the price of one. You got the first Dario is the evil bad guy, noble. You got the other Dario is like the, you know, the more cowardly one. You got like I said, you got Ray Fisher back. Anthony Hopkins is randomly in here voicing the voice of the cyborg of the robot that you see in the beginning, and he's also just kind of there and then just pieces out. It's like, okay, tune in for the next one in order to see more of this. And then, like you said, Jimon Hansu as Titus, who was like being set up as like this awesome, badass, like Romanesque general. Definitely a couple callbacks to his role in Gladiator there. And he comes in and it's a typical, oh, he's super drunk, whatnot. Then they give him a pep talk and then he's ready to join the crew. Yeah, like I said, there's just a lot of like stuff that like, again, it's like all the pieces are there, but it's like, okay, we have to deliver the shortened version first in order to get people invested in so that we can release the extended cut later on. And then that's what's going to like really like draw people in. Dexter, I don't know. What did you think of that? Like, did you at least like, were the characters at least like seeming promising, or like you were just like, nah, like it's like you didn't even recognize any of those faces?
I like the main character. I thought she wasn't the worst because she was the only one that we got like a lot of story for. Like we have some of the story for a couple of them, like Nemesis, for example. Like apparently her family died, and that's why she is killing all these like Nazi generals, which is what they are. They're Nazis in space.
It's pretty obvious there.
I mean, if you look at his outfit on the fucking main poster, like he looks like, yeah.
Oh, that's the third one. Sure, yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I thought she was kind of cool. I think my favorite character was probably the robot, I'll be honest. Even though he wasn't in a lot of it, I think the scenes he was in were cool. He wasn't carried by slow motion. His story was simple. He was a robot, and then the loyalty that they had to the king, he died, so they stopped fighting. So now they're kind of pacifists, and then, you know, he realizes like these guys are assholes, so now I'm gonna kill them. And then now he's defending the planet. He looked badass in the final scene, and I'm excited to see him in the second one. But yeah, I think the only cool character I thought was kind of the main chick too, because of
Cora.
She actually had some like plot story. Oh, and Nemesis, because she actually has lightsabers.
Yeah.
Did she though? I feel like there's just a gap in her story. Just like we don't know, like why is she the most like notoriously like sought after? Like I kind of like I feel like the second movie will introduce the fact that she's the one that slayed the king.
Yeah. Oh yeah. As if like right, and that's the other thing too. It's like well, two pieces of that, right? First piece, it's like tune in next time for part 2 in order for more character explanations. But yeah, I mean, and that's the other thing too. Also, is that because this is based off of a story and story tropes that we are well aware of, there are like so many different instances. They were like clearly building things up to be like big twists, and I'm like, okay, this is gonna happen. Like I figured out like pretty quickly. I'm like, okay, Charlie Hunnam, they're gonna do like the twist on the Han Solo thing, where it's like, oh, instead of like him being the rogue, you know, that helps him out, he's gonna end up betraying them. You know, and they're gonna do this thing where it's like, as far as the link that all ties them together, all their families were like killed by you know, by the evil empire, whatnot. And Sophia Boutella's character is probably going to be involved in like the murder of all their families. That's probably like why she's like seeking them all out specifically. And like you said, it's like there are multiple instances where it shows it's like, oh, the king was clearly going to make a change before he was killed. and obviously, establishing her connection with the guy who, took the king's place, Belisarius, who the guy you see at the end, who Noble, the Ed Skrein character is working for. I'm like, okay, so they're clearly setting it up where she's the one that killed the king for this guy and then felt guilty about it when she realized what a monster this guy was and then read for it. Like, they're clearly building that up to be this big twist, but it's like, if we're already predicting that now, like months before we even get part 2, that's a problem. And again, I feel like that's something that would have been solved, like you said, Dontre, had they just released both parts at once, So I guess like what my take on this is that I can't say that I was bored or never not engaged while I was watching it. I was very, very enjoying what I was watching. I like the visual style. I like kind of the sense that like, okay, I feel back like I'm placed in a world. And even if the characters weren't exactly that fleshed out, the acting was consistent and good enough. And like I said, I'm a sucker for any sort of getting a team together movies, like even down to the fucking scene of MacGruber where they spent all that time getting everybody together and then they all like die within like 15 seconds. Even shit like that works for me, And like you said, right? Like you were saying, Dexter, the fact that this is kind of like Infinity War, but cooler, where, yeah, I would liken this more so to the first Avengers, but I feel like this sentiment still stands where it's like, yeah, you're watching them get the team, get the characters together, I only wish that like you see in the trailer for the next one, it's like, okay, they're going to start training the villagers. Like I said, it's Magnificent Seven. We've seen this so many different goddamn times before. Star Wars has done this at least eight different times in the Clone Wars series alone, So, like I said, this is not something that we have not seen before. But all that being said, I guess just because I knew going in that this was a part, unlike Dune, where I didn't necessarily know, that wasn't confirmed that was going to be just part 1 until later on, I kind of just enjoyed it. I enjoyed it for what it was, I'm not saying this is not even close to being the best movie of the year, nor is this even the best Zack Snyder movie. I still have like 5 movies above it. But for what it was, I enjoyed it, I knew exactly what I was going to get going in. And it really didn't let me down because I knew that it was going to end on like a couple of massive cliffhangers. There were going to be a couple of big lead ups. I was interested to just like kind of be immersed in the world and, kind of get the exposition and kind of like have the characters, introduced one by one, like I was kind of waiting to see like, okay, who's going to be introduced now? Okay, who's going to be introduced now? What kind of like betrayals are going to happen. And also the fact that even though a couple characters died in this, you saw Charlie Hunnam's character, rightfully so, meet his end. And then you also saw Ray Fisher's character, unfortunately, meet his end. Man, they just cannot give that guy a break. Fucked him over hard at Justice League, and now they're doing him again in this. But if the ending is anything to be, to go by, then you should at least expect probably him to come back in the next one, since they revived Ed Skrein's character, since they kind of revealed that it was a cyborg. So I don't know. Any more thoughts you guys have as regards to that before we start to wrap this up and give our predictions as far as what could happen for part 2, the Scargiver?
You can go ahead, Dexter, if you want to go first.
What? Sorry?
If you want to go first, you were fixing
Oh,
it.
yeah. I don't know. It's like a Zack Snyder movie, but there was a lot of slow-mo, like a lot of it. Even when they were like on the first planet and like they would walk in the sand, like the sand would like it was kind of ridiculous. Some other things, I guess if it would be kind of too close to a Star Wars movie, but I was saying like if there was less characters, and then like you had maybe a smaller band, maybe it'd be too close to Star Wars. And I guess this was only a part 1, but I don't know. Star Wars had like 3 parts per like every like age, and they still did a good job. But yeah, I just wish I felt a little more connected to the characters. Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I wish, to start off, I wish I would have felt a little bit more connected to the characters. Like I just didn't care. I think after like the first big major push on the movie where like Gunnar, all this shit is happening because Gunnar opened his fucking mouth.
Right. Yeah.
Once you realize, Sindri knew like what type of time Noble was on, and he tried to deter him so much as possible, or try to get to lessen what the fucking like what was gonna happen. And Gunnar had to open his mouth. I said, "Oh yeah, Sindri's dead." As soon as he brought out the stick, I said, "Oh, my man's right here and his wife, GG's."
Dead.
It was over, and then just like after that, I knew that like Cora's character was gonna have to be like, I'm gonna have to go and like show people up now. She wanted to run, but it's like it was just again, it's a Snyder movie, too much slow mo. I wouldn't be surprised. I honestly like when I realized this was a Snyder movie, and like he was like, because right now he's trying to pitch to have Netflix buy the Snyderverse thing. I wouldn't be surprised if the second movie contains all his like DC casting. Like we want to see Jason Momoa. I don't think we'll see Ezra Miller.
No, definitely not Ezra Miller. We're never seeing him in anything ever again.
Yeah, like I don't know, like I just like the overall thoughts. I just really wish like the movie was more captivating and the story had like a little bit more like oomph to it. Like for me to knock out over a movie like is really like just disrespectful to like my time and like just like already that I pay for Netflix and you're putting out shit like this. Like this is
I was about to say after 2023 was the year that finally made you reactivate your Netflix subscription too.
Yeah, which is crazy.
Yeah, it's something you said you were never gonna do, which is that's crazy.
But like The Witcher season 3 came out, so I was like, I gotta watch it.
But was it worth it? Was it really worth it?
No.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man, so I guess in that sense, so that's pretty much your final thought. So your star rating out of 5 then for Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire, as I have to keep emphasizing.
2
out of 5.
Yeah.
Oh man, Dex, your final thoughts and star rating for. I'm not going to say the whole title again. You guys know.
What for Rebel Moon Part 1 is Child of Fire?
Exactly.
I probably also a 2. Didn't have much of a connection. It kind of felt like a weird like video game movie, and yeah, the robot was the coolest part, but he had like the least screen time.
Yep, sounds about right. Yeah, no, I'm gonna go a little higher than you guys. I enjoyed it. Like I said, I knew what I was getting going in. I'm giving it 4 out of 5. Like I said, it's not the best, but I enjoyed my time with it. I really, really did. So, like I said,
it's better than Barbie.
Yeah, it was better than Barbie, Dexter.
No,
as,
you're
as
stupid.
you know, yeah. No, I know. Everybody's against me. Everyone thinks that Barbie's the greatest movie ever because it's the greatest fucking meme movie. Whatever.
I wouldn't say it's the greatest, but like this is no way better than Barbie. Barbie had an actual plot. Maybe
wow, that's saying a lot. That's saying a lot.
It had good acting. It was funny. It was a great movie.
I don't condone that. But Barbie had an actual plot. It was shit, but it was an actual plot. Even it was filled with the propaganda and agenda.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm just saying.
No. But like, I love how people were like, "Oh, Barbie doesn't have an agenda." It's like, really, a Barbie movie made by Greta Gerwig in 2023 doesn't have an agenda. Okay, I'll go check into whatever universe that's not happening in because clearly you are not living in the same universe.
That's missing from Rebel Moon, an agenda.
Yes. But which, you know what? I don't hate that Zack Snyder is like the only filmmaker left that doesn't have an agenda. He just wants to make like cool looking shit with a lot of slow-mo and that's all he wants to do. You know, let the man be. Let the man make what he wants to make. He fought for years to be able to actually make what it is that he wants to make, you know? And so yeah, that's all I got to say about it before we wrap things up. So, people, with that being said, this crazy big experiment that I've been doing since Monday, it is over. This is it. This is officially the last podcast of the year that will be released in 2023. We will be back in January to talk about, oh God, another thing I'm looking forward to so much now. Percy Jackson and the Olympians, which has officially dropped his first couple episodes. Dexter's going nuts over there. Dex, you're going to be back on to talk about that with me. And man, I hope that you're able to enjoy it more than I am because man, that first episode was rough to say the least.
The second one was really good.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. I hope it gets better because man, that first episode was making the movie look kind of good by comparison, and that's pretty crazy coming from me to say the least. So, with all that being said, guys, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for helping me wrap this up. Like I said, for everybody that has enjoyed this episode, who have been listening on audio, if you've sat through the full, like 2.5 hour long version of this, congrats to you. If not, if you went back and listened through all the segments, I appreciate it. If you've been watching us individually as I've dropped these episodes on YouTube, still, like I said, it has been certainly a lot. It was a big undertaking for me to do this, but I'm glad that I got everybody pretty much on board and able to do it. Dexter, thank you for hopping on board, man. Once again, like I said, you made your debut earlier this week, and you came back later on this week, so you are the only co-host that has made 2 appearances in this one episode. Where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
My Amazon wish list and my Spotify.
Just your name, right?
Yep, just Dexter Armstrong.
Perfect, awesome. Dante, what? Not your Steam account or your League of Legends account, or were those for earlier this week?
Actually, yeah. If you want to, support my Steam wish list, I got some. It's the Steam winter sale right now, so if you want to go and like support that, go right ahead. It's that Asian muscle mommies at Steam.
I was wondering when those were going to make a reappearance on here.
And then if you want to go and buy my Amazon cart for my 2 kittens, that's perfect. But yeah, so
Dexter has introduced a new feature to this. Doctor, do you have any actual socials that you want to plug, or is that it?
AsianMuscleMommies.com.
Ooh, that's a good one. That's a good one.
Oh, man. And with that being said, people, that is it. We are ending 2023 on that note. Asian Muscle Mommies for life. You guys know all the socials. I've plugged it already. You guys know what I'm going to wrap this with. 12 scenes in a short film. We'll see you guys in 2024. It's been a great year. Have a good Christmas and New Year's.